2017. General public, all the handouts are out in the back. There's also speaker cards. Please give them to Tanya. You can speak on any topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. Okay, we start with roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Cribbs.
Here.
Commissioner Greenfield.
Here.
Commissioner Lemire.
Here.
Commissioner McCauley is absent. Commissioner McDougall.
Here.
Commissioner Moss.
Here.
And Commissioner Rectal.
Here. Okay, next is agenda changes, request deletions. Does anyone have any changes they want made? Okay, then we'll move on to oral communications. We are now going to talk about anything that is not on the agenda tonight, and we have one speaker, David Carnahan.
Good evening, Chair Rectal and Commissioners. My name is David Carnahan in the City Clerk's office, and you can all guess why I'm here. I'm here to share with you some exciting opportunities available on the city's boards and commissions. As you know, these are fantastic ways for members of the community to both give back to Palo Alto and help shape the future of our fantastic community. We're currently recruiting for the Architectural Review Board, the Historic Resources Board, and the Planning and Transportation Commission. There are 2 openings on the Architectural Review Board, 4 on the Historic Resources Board, and 2 on the Planning and Transportation Commission. And then our ask of you, we hope that each one of you is willing to reach out to at least 2 community members that you think would be a good fit for one of these roles, since you have a fantastic reach and are, as we would say, embedded in the community. The application deadline is September 19th at 4:30 p.m. Applications are available on the City Clerk's webpage, cityofpaloalto.org/clerk. And I will leave some flyers for each of you to take as a reminder of your homework to reach out to some community members. And I will leave some flyers in the back for anyone who is here in the audience interested in either participating yourselves or if you know someone in the community that might be a good fit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, please, if you have anyone you know that is good. The best commissioners usually are recommended by other commissioners. So please, if you have anyone that's sharp, please recommend that they apply for something. Okay, new business. First is draft minutes. Does anyone have any corrections, clarifications on the draft minutes? Do I have a motion for approving draft minutes? Anyone make a motion?
So I approve the minutes be adopted as provided.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. That passes.
Chair, could we do the department report at the beginning?
Yeah, we should. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not used to that.
I know it's a change
Can't
to the
teach an old dog new tricks. Okay, we'll move. We were quick on that. Department report is next then.
Thank you. Good evening, Kristen O'Kane, Community Services Department. I have a few things to report, and I also wanted to introduce Jasmine LeBlanc to my right, who I believe you've all met before. Jasmine is Community Services Strategy and Operations Senior Manager, and she's here today just to sort of learn the commission process and to help me out here as staff. So she wants to get to know the different commissions and the different work that we do a little bit better. So she's just gonna join me up here today. So I have a few things and then I'll turn it over to Jasmine. So I wanted to give a short presentation on our summer camps, just to provide a recap of what we've done over the summer. So just looking at camps by the numbers, we've categorized them by different themes, and our total number of camps is nearly 300 that we offered this past summer, and for a total of 3,583 total campers. And that produced a total revenue of over $1 million for the city. And one of the other benefits of our camps is that we do provide a lot of summer jobs for local teens. And we have 38 recreation camp staff on board with us in the summer. And we also provide opportunities for junior camp staff and also a counselor and training program to teach some of the younger kids who will eventually become camp counselors with us the ropes and get a head start on that. One thing that we're doing is we're really trying to refine our in-service training. So the first week of camps is actually just for us to train the counselors. And we're adding new things every year. This year we did a lot of diversity and inclusion training. We also review the developmental assets with them, customer service, how to handle, conflicts and sticky situations, in addition to all the legal requirements we're supposed to do. So it really is a great leadership opportunity for them, and they do learn a lot. So recreation camps. So our most popular camps still are our foothills camps. And some of the traditions that have been going on in those camps for 40 years are still going on. Our overnights at the campground, sing-alongs, hikes, canoeing, all those things are still just part of Palo Alto community, which is great. We also are in our second year, or just finished our second year of doing a teen week out, where a small group of teens go to a different location every day for a week and get to experience different things. In addition to our recreation camps, our art center, as well as our junior museum and zoo, also provide a lot of, and our children's theater provide a lot of exciting opportunities for kids. So some new camps this year in the art center were very popular. There were quite a few waiting lists, including one that travels around to different Bay Area museums and artist studios. Also at the Children's Theater, next time you're at Mitchell Park Community Center, you need to check out the Teen Mural project that was done over the summer. And there were also some new camps related to actually producing a musical. So they produced the musical 13. And it's just a great opportunity for kids who are interested in the arts to get really hands-on and involved in the process. And then the Junior Museum and Zoo had a great summer, offered some camps that are focused on more of science-related topics, and they also just the feedback we got back from them is that this was one of the best summers ever for their camps, and got a lot of great feedback from their campers and parents. And then finally, I just wanted to do a little summary of what happened over the summer with our swim lessons and swim camps. So spring and summer, we served with Palo Alto Swim and Sport, our third-party operator. Over 700 students learned to swim. And they report what are called splashes. So a splash is every time a student gets in the water. So we had over 7,000 splashes. And then we also had a new camp this summer, which is a summer aquatics camp that includes, it's a day camp that includes a swim lesson, time in the water, but then also land activities as well, to sort of give parents the opportunity to have their kids do a swim lesson, but be occupied for the entire day. We had 125 campers, so it wasn't completely full, but it is a new camp, and I think we'll continue it next summer, hopefully, and get the word out that we offer this camp. So, and that's all I had on that. Any questions?
How many kids did we have to turn away, do you know, for the camps that were full or oversubscribed?
I don't have that number with me, but
It's probably not easy to get,
out.
but it would be interesting to know how
Yeah.
many were turned away, and then the percentage of Palo Alto residents. And I think that there are scholarships available for kids, yes?
There are the fee reduction program.
Great, thank you.
And sometimes when the kids if a camp is full, the parents will find another camp for them to go into. So that might be a more difficult number to track, but I'll see if we can
The
find
sports
that.
camps that we have are, do people go to other sports camps rather than coming to the cities? Do you think that's why there's a lesser enrollment?
I think so. There's a lot more opportunities available for sports camps. That is one that we're noticing a decline in participation over the years. And I think it's just because there's so many choices. out there.
Well, it's a great tradition. I'm really glad that you brought this. It's really great to see, and it's great to see the photos and everything. So once again, a good job by rec staff, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you guys, do you know if the camps do surveys, or how do they receive the feedback from the parents? Is it through email, or just purely a parent going up to a counselor or someone and making a comment?
So it's both. Definitely, we have open communication, so if a parent wants to provide a comment to the counselor or anyone, they're welcome to do that, but we also do surveys as well.
Kristen, I think congratulations to everyone. I think that's spectacular. But I think Tanya lied to me because a copy of that presentation is not in the package. Could we make sure we get that?
Yes.
The reason I ask is I think any amount of reinforcement and publicity that we could do personally by talking to people about how good the programs are and how well it's done, I think that would be useful to everybody.
Absolutely.
So I too wanted to know the percentage of Palo Alto residents, and also the 714 students for the lessons. How does that compare with last year and the 7,200 splashes? Are we double or a third, or what? Third more?
This is Jasmine LeBlanc. I can't remember the exact number that we had last year, but I do think it was closer to 4,000 splashes.
Okay.
And that's just due to more offerings, or is that due to more recruitment or better publicity?
I think the main reason is that it's a longer period and we're offering it at more times. So we're really becoming more flexible.
The camps that were full, what was the limiting factor? Is it that we couldn't get more counselors, or that we didn't have the space? Or all the above? We don't know how it breaks down.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly space, but we do try to offer a diverse sort of selection for people to choose from, so they can focus on what their kids' interests are. So some camps tend to be more popular than others, and then we can use that information to make some adjustments the following year.
Like the middle working class that you said was very popular and had a wait list. Was that just a space constraint, or what was why couldn't we have multiple versions of that?
I don't exactly know the answer to that, but I'm assuming it's a space constraint and probably instructor constraint.
What's the process of adding a new camp if, say, there's someone in the area that does have an interest in offering a skill or offering something that might be a good camp? What would be the process of referring them to Parks and Rec, or who would that be?
They could contact me directly, and I'll get that to the appropriate staff. We get contacted frequently from people who are interested in having some camps in Palo Alto, so we look at all of them. So yeah, just send them over to me.
Are we aiming to break even financially with these programs, or and how do we do on that?
Yes, that is our goal for summer camps, is to break even on those.
And do we know if we break even, or?
We do.
And I should have said this initially. I can speak to this personally because both of my sons were camp leaders at one point. I think the double impact of the impact on the young kids and the leverage for them, and then the impact on the kids that are leaders, I think that really needs to be reinforced. I think it's really, really positive.
Thank you. I agree. And, a lot of campers then become the counselors in training, and then they become the counselors. And it's really neat to hear those stories of kids that have started out and, pretty much grown up in Palo Alto's camps.
More questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move back to business. The next is the Baylands Boardwalk replacement.
Chair, we actually had a few more things on department
Oh, I'm sorry.
report, if that's
I
okay.
am shortchanging you tonight.
We're moving on
reminded
anyway.
me. I was right along with you. So just a couple of other quick things. I do wanted to report that the RFP for the golf course did go out, and this is the RFP for golf course operations, maintenance, and also the food and beverage space there as well. So that went out yesterday, and we are having a pre-bid meeting on August 29th, and then proposals are due September 29th. We're hoping that it will go to council in December for the final approval of our selection.
And are we sending it to select companies, or are we just putting it on the website and hoping that people come?
Both.
Okay.
It's gone out to some companies that we know have that interest, and then we also do our normal advertising.
Okay.
And then finally, the last thing I have is I wanted to let everyone know that the YMCA and the city are partnering again this year on a community health fair. It is September 23rd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. In the past, it's been at Mitchell Park and Mitchell Community Center. This year, it's going to be here at City Hall, out on King Plaza, and then there'll be more focused speakers and seminars here within City Hall. And I can send out that information via email to all of you, but I think it's going to be a great event and probably bigger than it was last year.
When is it?
September 23rd. It's a Saturday.
Oh, very good.
And Jasmine just has a couple things.
Yes.
Okay.
Two more things. Just wanted to quickly announce that we're going to be offering a 3-week series of free dance fitness classes out on King Plaza in September as well, sort of a small scale special event called Get Fit, and we'll be advertising that later this week. We'll start. But that'll be the 3 Sundays in September after Labor Day weekend, 3 o'clock, free for anyone to join, and it should be really fun. It's likely to be Zumba, belly dancing, and hip hop dance. And
Is this
then
something that people register for, or you have to drop
just
by?
drop in. It's at King Plaza. Anyone can join, and it's meant to be kind of for all ages. And then the other thing I wanted to update was quickly on the aquatics contract. So Palo Alto Swim and Sport began operations of the lap swim and open swim programs last week. It seems to be coming around relatively smoothly. Still plenty of hiccups, but they've already got 137 monthly memberships and had over 450 people drop in for lap and open swims. And then in terms of the Rinconada Masters contract, that is still an outstanding contract, but Tim Sheeper, the owner and operator of Palo Alto Swim and Sport, and Carol McPherson have had several conversations, and they're getting very close to having an agreement. So.
Okay, in the meantime, Masters is just keeping their current,
Yeah.
and we don't have a contract for that. We're just kind of doing that.
It's month to month. So my understanding from the attorney's office is that it can be ended at any time, but we do fall back on that contract.
Okay.
So,
It'd be nice to get that done.
yes, we're all hoping for that quickly.
Okay. But otherwise, it seems to go well. Sheeper is happy with the facilities, and people are happy with the new offerings or the new.
In general, I mean, there are people who are unhappy with changes, but most of the comments have been more around just having to get adjusted to a new point of sale system. So, things change, and hopefully that's going to get a lot better as people do get on board with the membership program and things.
And refresh my memory. If you have a membership at Palo Alto, can you use that at Menlo Park? Or is
No,
okay.
not at the time. It is something that I think is worth exploring the feasibility of in the future, but right now, they're, totally separate.
At one time, that had been discussed about having reciprocity between the two groups.
It would make sense. I think we'd probably have to, really work with the attorney's office to structure it in a way that works legally for both cities.
Okay. Any questions? And you want
I don't think so. I think we should all wait and see how everything develops and see if it's good for the city and we can provide the kind of service that we want to provide, and we have enough lifeguards and we have enough teachers and we have enough swimming lessons and people are using the pool to the max. So, and the fact that it's an 18-month contract, I think I'm encouraged by, because we'll all have a chance to review it, I expect.
You should be able to make everyone happy. I don't see any showstoppers. It's just people don't like change.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, is that it? Okay. Now we can move on to business. We have the Baylands Boardwalk rehab.
Good evening. I'm Megha Bansal with Public Works Engineering. I would like to introduce our team tonight. We have Elizabeth Ames with Public Works Engineering and John Aiken with Community Services in the audience. And sitting next to me is Anthony Nitaro, our consultant with Biggs Cardosa Associates. Tonight we are here to provide you an update on the Baylands Boardwalk replacement project. And so our presentation includes a brief background of the project. We will be discussing project elements, and we would like your input specifically on certain items, including overlooks, railing and decking, benches and viewing panels, and then we will talk about a little bit about schedule and next steps. So a little background, as you all know, the Baylands Boardwalk was closed in 2014 due to structural damage and safety concerns. And we performed a feasibility study in 2016 to assess the condition of the boardwalk. That study recommended replacement of the structure to have a longer life, reduce maintenance, and ADA compliant structure, and to address sea level rise. Soon after, I think in 2015, we also made minor structural repairs in the first 200-foot segment of the boardwalk, which is now open to the public. And we also presented findings of the study to the Commission back in March 2016, and Commission was in favor of replacement of the structure. A design contract was approved by Council with Biggs Cardosa in September 2016, and we developed initial design concepts and presented those in a community meeting in May this year. The next slide, it shows an overview of the project. It includes all the project elements, and which is essentially replacement of the existing boardwalk with a new boardwalk that follows the same alignment and that has same length. And we will have some other components, including additional overlooks and an observation platform, new railing and decking, pylon supports, and some amenities. Tony is going to go over the details of the design. So with that, I give it to Tony.
Okay, so first slide, just talking about alignment, height, and width. We're going to replace it, exact same alignment. The width of the structure, the existing structure is 4 feet wide. We're going to widen it to 5 feet to better provide ADA access and passing lanes. And one change since the previous presentation, the elevation of the deck has changed due to sea level rise conditions and our coordination with the BCDC and the other regulatory agencies. They are interpreting the higher end of the curve, so they've raised our upper bound of where we can put the deck elevation, and we're proposing to match basically the deck elevation of the existing Nature Center at elevation 13.5.
How much of a change is that?
That's about a 3-foot change, I think, since from the existing, 3.5. It's about elevation 10 now.
Yeah,
Plus or
I think it
minus.
is between 3.6 to 4.3 feet.
The higher end
Higher.
is where the collapse of the existing boardwalk is, but the original constructed height was about elevation 9.9 or 10, so it's about 3.5 feet.
And the final overlook, or the viewing
The
platform?
final overlook at the end, we're just going to take it straight all the way out.
Oh, that's unchanged?
That would be unchanged, yeah. So instead of ramping down from the nature center out and then ramping up at the observation platform, you'd basically go straight out.
Okay.
Okay, so another item that had changed since we previously presented, the original concept was to replace in-kind, have 2 overlooks and the observation platform out at the end. And per discussions internally with the public and with operations at the Nature Center for seizing opportunities for more interaction with the Bayland site itself, we're proposing 4 overlooks strategically located to highlight different elements out on the site. And those are, you can be seen on that one exhibit where the 2 existing are and where the 4 are proposed. The structure will have, we're proposed to use timber railing, similar style to what was done on the interpretive center. The railings will be customized for use on the boardwalk. Since we have a very long linear structure, a lot of repetition, we're going to design the railings to be constructed in a panelized configuration, which will allow the construction to proceed quicker, less construction work on the site, more work can be done off-site and carried on. The railings will be a minimum of 3.5 feet high to meet ADA criteria. And then one element that we'll look for input from the commission on has to do with observation panels at the overlooks and the observation platform to allow viewing through the railing. We have on the interpretive center, there are glass panels there. For the boardwalk itself, in consultation with the biologists, we've shrunk the size of those openings to be a little bit smaller, less likely to cause a bird strike farther out where the birds are more active. And we have 2 alternatives to look at. One's a glass panel like on the interpretive center, and then there's also been some discussions about using a wire mesh panel might be safer for the alternative for some of the birds. Another change since we've spoken last that came out of our consultation with the biologists and coordination with the regulatory agencies is there a concern with the higher boardwalk elevation of raptors perching on the higher railing and giving them an opportunity to hunt the mouse out there. So it's been proposed to put what we're calling raptor deterrent rollers. They're basically a roller system. If a bird lands on it, it rolls so they can't just sit and perch. There's a similar system in place at Alviso Park, and there's a photo up there of that system. So basically it's just a roller that sits along the top rail that would discourage raptors from perching there. Let's see. Another key feature is going to be the decking of the boardwalk. The existing boardwalk has longitudinal planks, or the key boards are running parallel to the direction of travel. The project's proposed to use a transverse decking system. That's very common on many of the prefab bridge structures along the trails. The advantages of that, we get to use a smaller member because you got a shorter span. That helps us with costs. It helps with maintenance costs down the road because you would be replacing smaller elements. And all of the decking elements, we're looking at using redwood, similar to what was used for the interpretive center. The main structural elements consist of, very similar to the existing, timber posts or piling that goes down into the bay muds of the marsh. They'll be capped with timber beams, and then we'll provide timber cross bracing to provide lateral stability to the system. And then there'll be longitudinal stringers that support the deck elements. All of these primary structural elements, we're proposing to use Alaskan yellow cedar, which is a natural, durable softwood. Mostly comes from Alaska and areas in Canada. That's as an alternative to pressure-treated Doug fir, which the regulatory agencies have been strongly discouraging to avoid the chemicals getting into the wetlands. And that was a material that's already been used on other projects and approved by them, and it was recommended by the Water Board for this project.
One of the options before was the metal screws.
Yes, so the metal screws, when the structure got higher, the cost factor for the metal screws went down, or it was no longer cost effective because they're very flexible. And the higher we got, the more sway you're going to get out of your system. So we would have to increase the number of elements in shorter spans. So we moved away from that.
And what type of lifetime do we think we're going to get for these posts?
These, we're looking at 50 to 75 years is the target.
In the mud, we're talking.
Yeah, in the mud. So the Alaskan yellow cedar is a fairly durable material, and it's in marine environments, salt water. It also is resistant to marine borers, so it has good natural properties. So this graphic shows visually what the cross-section of the boardwalk would be. The elements in more of the yellow-brown are the Alaskan yellow cedar. That's the primary structural elements below. And then your walking surface, your decking, and your railing, we're going to use heart redwood, similar to what was used down the interpretive center. We would like to include benches at each of the overlooks in the observation platform. The photos on the left side show what's existing. On the right are just some initial concepts for the proposed benches. We would like to include armrests to help facilitate getting up and down. It's a lot easier for folks. We would have one at each overlook and back-to-back in the center of the observation platform, similar to existing. And in accordance with the site assessment and design guidelines for Palo Alto Baylands Nature Preserve, so long title for your guidelines for out there, all the wood would be stained with this natural gray product from Olympic, and any metal fasteners and components would be painted Sandy Hook gray from Benjamin Moore. So exactly what was done at the Nature Center. And then we have the opportunity with the follow-on project that there's going to be interpretive signage incorporated into the project at the overlooks and the observation platform. Our design will accommodate some slanted railing that will incorporate the signage in the future, and we'll also design the elements to be able to facilitate the attachment of different interpretive features that are being developed by the city separately. And the last things for me, just a reminder of some of our key construction constraints that we're dealing with environmentally. Because of the Ridgeway Rail out there, we have a work window from September 1st to January 31st to stay out of their breeding season. So that's one of our key constraints. Hydraulically, during that time period, we can expect a high tide, usually once or more a month. So we're going to have to accommodate some flooding during the course of the project and some loss of work days. The construction window is in the rainy season, so we've factored in some rain days for our construction estimate. Subsurface conditions, we're in a marsh, very weak soils, so that's accommodated in the design of the supports, as well as we don't really have a good ability to work from the marsh deck level itself. So we've proposed and designed the elements to be small enough to be constructed with small equipment from the boardwalk itself. The contractor, we would expect, may have to do some localized strengthening to support his operations of the existing before he removes it. But the plan is to work from the existing boardwalk. The only caveat to that is access out to there. Instead of going through the nice newly renovated nature center, we need to come around the outside with a series of marsh mats on the marsh level to get the access for the contractor on a daily basis. And with that, I think Megha will take over schedule and next steps.
Yeah, so regarding schedule, we have completed the preliminary design of the project, and we are currently preparing CEQA document. We plan to come back to the commission for review and recommendation of park improvement ordinance in September during CEQA circulation. What you see on the schedule for agency permit and completion of design by summer 2018 is a best case scenario. We can be in construction next summer in September, pending permits. And our more likely scenario is September of 2019, due to the construction window that Tony just mentioned about, 5 months construction window, if we don't get our permit. So with that, I think you can ask questions.
Okay. Ann, do you have any?
I just was curious if the price continues to go up with the changes, and then with the delay of the construction, does it continue to increase?
So far, we're still projecting to be within the budget constraints that the city has set. Anytime the project moves farther out in time, there will be associated potential cost increases. One thing we have done in our design that I had failed to mention, the existing boardwalk has supports every 10 feet on center along the length. We've increased that with the materials that we've proposed to a 12-foot spacing, so we're actually putting in fewer elements than originally estimated in our feasibility study, so that has helped to sway some of the additional costs associated with materials and things that have changed. So.
Okay, thank you.
And also the panelized construction of railing will make it faster. So we are hoping to complete construction in that 5-month window.
Good.
So that will also help with construction cost.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm really hoping that you can start September 2018, since we've waited so many years. Is there any way that you can start construction in that 2018 timeframe, even if you don't have all of the permits yet? Is there some staging or some stuff that you can do ahead of time?
I think that is less likely due to permitting or our experience with permitting agencies. What do you think?
All right. Another thing is that a number of things changed because the height level was higher, and I was actually hoping that it could stay low enough that once in a while it would flood, because that's so dramatic, and one of the highlights that people look forward to when they come to the Baylands is to see the flooding that happens once or twice a year. Is there no way? You said that certain agencies required that you be up that high. Do we have to do that?
So in general, it's been primarily BCDC that's driving that criteria, and their primary goal is they're looking at maintaining access, and they want the structure to be high enough to maintain the access We've approached them about trying to avoid getting it as high. We originally proposed a kind of a happy medium between the existing and the current proposed, and so far we haven't had any luck in getting that criteria adjusted.
And one other thing, and that is that you said that you couldn't use the metal screws because you had to raise it. But I also thought that you were going to use the existing base so that you wouldn't have to drill more holes into the mud, that you would use the same holes and that you would sort of build out the boardwalk from the safety of the existing one, working out. Is that not going to happen?
So we're going to use the existing boardwalk as a working platform to construct the new. So actually the new piles are constructed outboard of the existing boardwalk so that they can be constructed while the existing boardwalk's in place. And another benefit of having them outboard is they're out of the shadow zone, so the vegetation grows more robustly out there, so there's less erosion. Because currently, underneath the existing boardwalk, with it being low, there's a heavy shadow and nothing grows, and then a channel has formed with the water coming in and out, and that's been part of the problem with why the structure had failed in the first place, is it lost some of that support. And
Okay, so it's really going to be in the same spot. It's just going to be wider.
yes, same spot. I don't know, yeah, right here, in the very back of our presentation, there's the anticipated construction staging, and that shows the first one is the existing boardwalk. The contractor does some whatever minor repairs he needs to be able to move his equipment out on it, and then the second one shows the piles being put in outboard of the existing. And then when we no longer need then they'll kind of work their way backwards, remove the existing as they're building the cross frames across,
Okay.
so that we stay out of the
All right.
marsh to the greatest extent possible.
And then on the sidings, you said they could either use the bird deterrent glass, which seemed like an oxymoron, or the wire mesh. And I would hope that you would go with the wire mesh because it seemed like you're making it much more difficult to see down in there. There's more stuff between the kids and the marsh. And so if you have the mesh, you can actually see straight through the mesh, where if you have a glass thing, it's going to get scratched, it's going to change its opacity over time, and it'll just be that much more difficult for people to look down in there, especially little kids. And then the last thing is the Raptor roller. You know that the Raptors, majority of them are going to be on that boardwalk that the PG&E uses, or they fly over the marsh hawks, the harriers. They just fly over, and the herons, they land in there. So I'm dubious that that's going to work, but you say it's in action already. What do you?
We've had numerous debates internally with the city and the design team and the biologists on that very issue. It will come down to really the coordination with the regulatory agencies and what they will allow. To some extent, because there is that other project, there's a precedent which they rarely relax their requirements once they've gotten it out of somebody before. So we'll continue to work to reduce that. I did talk them out of, they wanted, everywhere I've got a horizontal piece of wood that sticks out, like at each of the vents and the piles, they wanted bird deterrents out there. I've talked them out of that that's sufficiently low that they won't perch there to hunt. So, but yeah, we're making every effort to try and glean back as much as we can.
Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, just a quick question. You said that the expected life of the project is 50 to 75 years. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the target life.
Okay.
Of the program.
And some of that has to do, is there a way, I guess, does that have to do with how the wood, the choice of the wood and how it goes into the mud, or what's the maintenance on something like that to keep it going?
In our mind, the key elements are going to be the timber post piles. From our understanding, that's an area where the city had to spend most of their budget in the past, though there were, I think, some issues with the existing railing because you had metal, a lot of metal components in that there was some problems with that and the detail of how that got connected down at the base. There was a lot of splittings of those particular boards. So we've tried to be strategic in some of the details we're using to avoid the things that had trouble in the past on the project, and taking a lot of cues from what's out at the interpretive center.
Okay. That's all I have.
It's a very comprehensive plan and very well thought out, and I applaud you for that. I like the accounting for the sea level rise, and that's very important given the projected lifetime of the project. Also, the environmental considerations during construction. I like the traverse plank decking plan that you suggested. The question on the glass panels versus the wire mesh. I'm wondering, is the interpretive center happy with the glass panels that they put in? Or said another way, if they had to do it over again, would they put the glass panels in or would they put the wire mesh in? And that would seem to go a long ways towards answering what to recommend putting there.
Hi, John Aiken, City of Palo Alto. We are happy with them. I think what the instructors that give me feedback for the classes that they're taking out there say that the kids gravitate to those glass panels to be able to see out because the pickets are kind of a natural barrier. They're a little bit more maintenance for us, especially when the swallows are nesting and pooping on things, but we're happy with them. One of the issues with continuing that design further out into the marsh, though, is you have more nocturnal species in the marsh that can't see the glass that is designed to reflect UV light. And so the agency has asked us to narrow that down and perhaps put other kinds of designs on there so that nocturnal birds can see them. And so here we're trying to improve visibility for humans, but take visibility away for birds so that they don't strike it. One of the things about mesh is horizontal lines, human eyes have a harder time seeing through. And so if we end up going with the mesh design, we may look at a hexagonal pattern or a vertical pattern or something just to try and maximize visibility for people, because that's really the goal.
Okay, thank you. I was definitely wondering how clean does the glass stay and how much of a problem is that? It sounds like
it stays relatively clean. It's sort of self-cleaning glass. It sheets stuff off, but we have to go out and clean it off every once in a while too.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Regarding the deterrent roller rails, it sure seems like a wood railing would be preferable if we can swing that, and it sounds like we're considering the roller rails if we're basically tasked to do so, but we wouldn't do that unless we had to. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, I would agree. We'd like to avoid them if we can talk them out of it. So we'll keep putting that pressure and see where that takes us.
Great. Full speed ahead on that one. I like the arm rests on the benches. I just wanted to confirm, given the examples that you have, the benches will be looking out towards the view, so the back of the bench will be closest to the main part of the path.
Yes.
Right, and I think that's reflected in the drawings. It's just,
Yeah, it is reflected on the drawings.
right, okay, good. There was some mention of using the FSC wood for the Alaskan yellow cedar. I'm wondering if that's something that the city has done before or is considered doing or is elected not to do because of cost considerations, or if this is something new that's available?
Just want to make sure I understand the composite, plastic composite wood, is that what you're talking
No,
about?
the Forest Stewardship Council
Oh,
approved wood,
Gotcha. I'm not aware if the city has done that before. They did have me specifically talk to the mills or the suppliers, and the ones that I've spoken to have indicated when you use the FSC, it basically drops you down to about 15% of the mills will certify. For the Alaskan yellow cedar, in particular, it's a tree that's naturally in decline at the moment because of environmental changes, temperature changes and things. But the material is good for up to 80 years after the tree dies, so they're currently harvesting primarily a lot of these stands of the trees that have died. So there is a general supply out there. Also in talking to with them on the FSC, so there will be if you go that route, there is a premium that you pay for that. That would be estimated about 10 to 15% price point, and it takes about, because of the fewer mills, you need an extra month basically in lead time for acquiring the material. So that may have a factor as to when we can get the design done and out to bid. We just need to factor that far enough in advance to account for that extra time.
So is time more of a consideration than cost at this point?
I guess it depends on when we get everything finalized and can get it out to bid. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, and last question, how confident are we that we can complete the project within the 5-month window? And what can we do to help ensure this can be accomplished?
Okay, so I did take a close look at it. We've consulted with our hydraulics consultant to find out a reasonable number of rain delays and potential flood days. We've looked at breaking it down into kind of work crews and structure. One of our key components is panelizing the railing system. So basically each 12-foot length between the supports, we bring out a panelized piece that's constructed off-site. And then we use the top rail to tie all of those panels together, so we'd have a longer top rail, and then it's all attached to the side rim joist. So that's one of our key factors in shortening our work window. So based on the numbers that we have so far, we're optimistic that we can do that. I have a little bit of float in the schedule. I do need to still, as the design develops, vet it with some more folks in our office and things. But yeah, we definitely want to try and do everything we can to help hit that window.
So if we had a rainy season like we had this past year, would that make this fairly difficult to accomplish? And the second part of the question is, if we get 80% completed and we run out of time, what happens? We just have a 80% completed project sitting there for 7 months until we can get back to it?
That would be likely. However, the first 200 feet is open, so they would be utilizing that existing structure throughout their construction. We figure they'll be working back from the platform in, so there is the opportunity if we can get it far enough back so that you have to winterize it, but we can get it far enough back to the existing portion that was still structurally sound and can stay open, then we could facilitate a transition from the old to the new, a temporary one at the end of our construction window.
Thank you.
Sure.
Or you might just have one 12-foot gap that you had to jump over for 7 months or something.
Springboards.
Your first question in the presentation was the number of overlooks, and nobody's spoken to that. In the presentation, you talked about the different interaction. You talked about interaction with the baylands, and you talked about the different kinds of elements. I don't mean to be cynical or whatever, but it's all baylands. I'm not sure that there are different elements as you go. You could create different stories. I agree with that. And we have no evidence of the cost of having 4 bulb outs or whatever you want to call them, overlooks, as opposed to just one. I would personally vote for fewer that would reduce the cost and would allow us to get it done faster if that ever became a question. My second thing is, it wasn't in the presentation that you did today, but it was in the material that we had ahead of time, that we're providing PG&E access to their platforms along the way. My question is, has anybody ever asked PG&E what their participation in paying for this is? I don't know that anybody here could answer that, but I would think that if we're providing PG&E access, it would be kindly of them to help.
Yeah, and we are planning to meet with PG&E to discuss about that interface where their catwalk crosses over our boardwalk. But we have not discussed about them paying for.
I don't know why we wouldn't ask. I would encourage us to ask, and frankly, I'm going to ask you again later how much they're paying. I don't think we should just give it to them without the question.
Okay. Yeah.
In terms of the rollers that spin, or spinning rollers on the handrails, I'm both skeptical, as other people have suggested here, about the importance of that, although eliminating Raptors opportunities if we can, and I don't know what percentage we're eliminating, I think that's important. But if you go to Bixby, where there are all the signage holders, there's no signs, but signage holders there, they're all covered in guano or whatever you want to call it at this point. So it's obvious that that's where they will sit, or birds will sit. And so if we cover all of the rails, but still in your picture here it shows the signage platform, that all you're going to do is make it so that we know exactly where the birds are going to sit. They're going to sit on the signs. And so I'd like to hear at some point a more complete explanation of, if we put rails on 90% of it, does that solve the problem? Because the birds just sit on the other 10%. They're not stupid. And what we're trying to protect is, another comment is, in the documents we had, it said several endangered species. I don't know that there's really several as opposed to 2, and certainly the CEQA for the Buckeye Creek was pretty definitive in terms of what it was, and I don't know at what point will we define how much we're trying to protect. And certainly my lack of success in seeing clapper rails, or ridgeway rails as you call them today, tells me that they're pretty rare, and same with the mouse. So I'm all for protecting it. I just like to see better definition. The conversation about whether we're using wire mesh or plexiglass. One of the things that's incredibly successful in the Environmental Volunteers Eco Center is the plexiglass in the floor, not just the plexiglass on the wall. I would like to hear if we've explored that at the overlooks or at the far end, if there was an opportunity to do that. I realize from what was previously mentioned that would probably be a maintenance issue, because people will step on it or whatever, but you don't have to put it on the pathway. You can put it to the side or whatever. So maybe you have to replace it every 3 years, or I don't know what it would be, but it's certainly an effective way to allow people to really get a close look, and particularly because my other comment, I would agree with the comment that if we are, I think more than one comment's about if we didn't have to go to 13.5 feet, I'd sure like to not go to 13.5 feet. All of a sudden, this feels like the New York, what do you call it? The where you're on the old railway line and you're 30 feet above the ground. I'm a little worried that we're going to lose that contact, that interaction that you talked about with the Baylands if we do that. My last comment would be about the cedar. I think the issue is that 50 years later, we not only know a lot more about which woods are good for this kind of thing, but care a lot more about which woods are good for this kind of thing. And so I understand why it's, cedar at this point, and I would applaud that. So thank you. And I think this is really good work, so I'm really excited about getting it done.
Yeah, I have a couple of complaints. One complaint being just the height. You lose that connection to the Baylands. And so is there any way that we can lower that down, or at some of the overlooks, can we have some steps that go down? Are there panels down below that the kids could go down and see? When you're that far up, you can't see the pickleweed at all. If you get down close, you get a much different view than if you're up 10 feet above. So even if we can't do the whole thing at the height, can we have portions that go down to provide viewing of the close viewing of the pickleweed? The next, the schedule. When I look at the schedule, it says agency permits. Well, first of all, I'm surprised that Don didn't catch this. It's fall 2017 to summer 2018. It would be nice to have a little better resolution on that, but it kind of scares me that we're doing the permitting and then starting construction right after the permitting, and we're really susceptible to permitting delays. Is there anything that we can do to feed the preliminary designs to the permitting agency so they can get a first cut through, and then when we get the final designs, we can get it to it? Because we know it's not going to change dramatically.
Yeah, so at this point, we are hoping to, so we cannot submit applications for permitting before CEQA is circulated and approved. So the reason you see these seasons right now, because it's a wide range, and we will have some more, better understanding of the months or definitive dates, maybe in a couple of months. And so we are currently anticipating 7 to 8 months of permitting, maybe by April if we do circulation in September or October. And then we can continue working on the design to progress it to 100% design, and then we will have a couple of months for sending the project out to bid and award construction contract. So that's our best case. We are still hoping for that.
CEQA is scheduled to end in December.
Yeah, end of December, but that would be approval of CEQA document. Maybe it may be November. It depends on when the CEQA is circulated. So this is just giving you a more, conservative schedule.
Yeah, but when we look at all these things, are there things we can do in parallel? What can we do to push this to the left? If you had to push this to the left, what would you attack?
I think what we can do at this point in parallel is continue design, but we cannot submit any application for review, any permitting application before CEQA is circulated and the comment period ends.
And that CEQA has to have the final design on it.
No, it doesn't have to have final design. The design we currently have would be adequate for CEQA.
Can we start the CEQA right now?
Yeah, so we are working on the CEQA document right now. So
and when will that be released?
We are hoping sometimes in September or latest in October.
And can we pull that to the left at all?
I'm sorry?
And can we make that start earlier?
Probably not. Maybe mid-September is the best case I can think of.
I mean, when I talk, this is, the Baylands Boardwalk is probably the most common thing that people complain to me about. They say, it's been closed forever, what's taking so long? And the public just doesn't appreciate this hoop jumping that we have to go through, but still, can we do anything to make the hoop jumping go faster? I think this whole project, we've been too happy just letting it slip. It'll get done when it gets done. And every year that it goes by is one more year that the kids don't get to see it, and the kids grow up and they don't appreciate it anymore. You're missing a generation here.
We will try to have some initial discussion with permitting agencies. We will discuss with our environmental consultant and see if we can feed in some information to them about the design, and we can get back to you on that.
Okay. Yeah, anything that we can accelerate this, anything we can start right now, I think would be well served to do that. Because I really want to I agree with David, I really want to see the 2018 start.
And we are trying for that.
And if it goes to October 2018 or November 2018, can we go halfway out by January 31st, 2019 and finish it up the following year, or do we have to do all or nothing?
Yeah, so the problem with the halfway out is we've only got existing boardwalk that goes 25% out that's open, so we need to target, if we're going to split it, try and get it back to the, all the way up to the current open portion. So we'd have to try and construct 75%.
Well, you're going from the outside in. I'm thinking to go from the inside out.
Oh, I see. Yeah, if you go from inside, if we have a...
Or go from the middle in the first tranche, and then go from the total end to the middle.
Yeah, if we're resigned to a two-season construction, then you have the ability to build out from the one end, so then you would have use of half of the structure for January to September, and then you'd lose it again until they finish the construction.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a feasible option, I think, from the
Or if it's 3
staging
years, a
we can
third.
No, we don't want to go that route.
The other thing I would suggest is that communications and marketing about the status needs to be part of the plan and the scheduling that you have there, because I think, to the chairman's point, people are frustrated, and part of that frustration is lack of understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, we will make sure that we
There needs to
do
be a
enough.
Facebook page for the boardwalk or something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there any, this is crazy probably, but is there any way that somebody at CEQA could understand about the nesting birds and the short season that we had to construct this and give us some sort of a start? Did we ever ask that? I mean, I know you're not supposed to be able to do anything until you have the design and have it submitted and having CEQA review it, but because not everybody has this issue about the nesting birds here with only, 5 months for construction, can we not get some sort of a variance or a pass or something?
I do not think that is possible with the permitting agencies. When we were doing interpretive center, we had the same limitations.
I'm afraid
Maybe
that
we can do 6-day, work during construction. We can incorporate something like that to expedite construction.
I'm afraid it's only because they understand, they do understand the nesting birds that's the problem.
Well, and it's a matter of complying with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Which it would be a violation of a federal law, so.
If we
Other
go
than that-
outside of that range, you say?
If we.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, anything that you can do move things in parallel, to do things iteratively instead of just waiting for the final and passing it on. I think that would be very good for the project.
With our consultant, and we will also have discussion with permitting agencies.
Okay, and you're coming back next month for the PIO?
We are planning for that.
Okay, and then that PI will have the final design? Or is
It will still have a preliminary design,
Okay.
but all the project components and scope of the project.
Okay, and then, so the PIO then will go to council then thereafter?
Right.
And council has funding arranged? We don't have to ask for funding on this. This is,
Yeah, so the design is currently in, design funding is in the CIP, and $1 million is in 2019 fiscal year budget, already in the budget.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Is the presentation that you gave available on the website for us?
We will make it available tomorrow.
Okay, and could you do one thing for me? Could you add your names to the front page?
Absolutely.
And if you do that, then that would give some of us the opportunity, if we were meeting with council members, to make sure that we were lobbying and helping them understand what we're trying to do here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next is Rinconada Park and Junior Museum and Zoo, long-range plan and draft. Peter Jensen will be talking about that.
Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Jensen, Landscape Architect for the City of Palo Alto. We're going to go through a presentation tonight for the Rinconada Long Range Plan, as well as touch on the environmental work that is associated with the project in conjunction with the Long Range Plan. Because the zoo facility of the Junior Museum and Zoo is in or within the boundaries of the park, the two projects were tied together. So we'll be touching some on that as well, because the environmental report basically ties those two things and starts to look basically at the development of the long-range plan and what's recommended in that, as well as the proposed Junior Museum and Zoo development, which I think you've seen recently and will see again. So I'm going to go through a presentation. We'll go through the long-range plan first. When we're done with that, I think we can do questions specifically to the long-range plan. I'll do a short presentation very similar to the master plan CEQA work that we did there, the environmental work, and then we can do answer questions about that as well. John Aiken is here from the Junior Museum and Zoo, so there's specific questions about that. They can address those as well. So just go through the presentation here. The Rinconada Long Range Plan started back in 2012. It was put together to review and evaluate the park itself and make recommendations on the future development and improvements of the park. It went through a full design and community outreach process, which we can talk about that schedule. The goals of the Rinconada Long Range Plan was to create a better connection and awareness to all the community facilities that exist around and within the park, coordinate and update the park resources and amenities to reflect the current and future needs of park users and guests, respond to park usage as it relates to surrounding uses and the neighborhood, also to address building and ADA codes, and to coordinate the user group objectives. This is a schedule basically of the process that was undertaken for the long-range plan. It included several meetings with the Parks and Rec Commission, as well as the community. A stakeholder group was also involved that was made up of representatives of the facilities around that, some city staff, including the Children's Library, Lucy Stern, the Junior Museum and Zoo, the Art Center, the library, as well as the community groups that use the park regularly, including the swimmers, the tennis association, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, and the like. So you can see that in the process basically of 2012 and 2013 was when the major work was done to put the long-range plan together. At that point, the CEQA work started in, and like I said, it was tied to the JMZ project. That project has been under the development. If you've been on the commission for a while, I think you've seen it a few times over the last few years. Basically, getting that design finalized to a point where we could then embark on the CEQA work is kind of dictated the schedule basically we've been on. And I will say, if you'd like to see more information on the project itself, the project webpage does have all the presentations and that went along with the process of the project. I think in general what we found from the community was that the community wanted to maintain the park pretty much as it is today. I think the plan does a good job of addressing that need. The actual, let's see here. The actual park then and how it's broken down into its pieces in the long-range plan itself are known as the park elements. Those park elements that were really reviewed were the pedestrian and bicycle circulation, the gateways into the park itself, the playground areas, the area around the Girl Scout house, which is the location of the only group picnic area in Rinconada Park, the main lawn area, the tennis courts, the pool area, the part that runs along the street frontage along Embarcadero known as the Arboretum, because of the existing mature trees that are there, including a historic or heritage oak tree number 2 for the city of Palo Alto, which is over a 200-year-old oak tree. The concrete bowl, the magic forest, the substation perimeter, and then the Hopkins street frontage. So if you had an opportunity to take a look at the long-range plan report, it broke down the park into these elements, and then they discussed what the recommendations were for future either maintaining or improving those spaces. One of the neat parts about Rinconada Park is that it does sit in the middle of a very diverse facilities for the city. I've named them previously, but it does act as the hub. Currently right now, and one of the main factors for the long-range plan was really kind of looking at the circulation through the park itself and how it could be enhanced to connect the facilities that do exist around the park itself. So this diagram was put together looking at basically the different levels of paths that are there. So the yellow is the primary basically pathway that's connecting from the library over to the Lucy Stern Center, which would be a more enhanced walkway. The orange represents some secondary walkways that feed into the main walkway, and then the purple are then a level below that are connecting the secondary basic pathways together. It was very important. We looked at actually 2 different designs for the main pathway in the process of the master plan's development. One that followed and went more towards the Hopkins side. It was felt by the commission staff and the community that the more direct link through the middle of the park, currently very similar to what it is now, would be the way to maintain that. I would like to say too that in the development of the Junior Museum and Zoo plan that we've developed a better connection from Middlefield Road into the park, which I think is a great enhancement from I think what we started to look at in the long range plan a few years ago. It's also interesting to note too, because you've seen the process of the parks master plan for all the parks. This is a long range plan, which is very similar to that, even though it was put together a few years ago. In the process, of course, of time, that things change and evolve. So you'll see that the parking lot design that is shown in the plans here is not basically what is being proposed today. It's been tweaked a little bit because of the more intense design process that has gone into the Junior Museum and Zoo and making that. So the recommendations of the plan over time again will something that we can revisit. I think the majority of them are very good recommendations that don't impact the park a lot, but add the amenities that we need there. But like the master plan itself, it is an evolving document, and it's not totally set in stone. So I'm going to go through I think it's 4 slides here. Each one of them represents different aspects of the recommendations to the park. This one being the existing park element to be enhanced. So these are things that exist currently in the park now, and the recommendations, what we can do to improve them slightly. The first one is the open turf area. Basically, that's talking about maintaining that space as it is now. That's a very important area of the park. It's used for large group gatherings. We would like to maintain that. We'd like to improve the irrigation and drainage of that site to make it more usable and to make it more sustainable. The children's playground to the west, right behind the Girl Scout house, will remain in that location. With continued equipment upgrades and ADA upgrades as we do with playgrounds over time. The multi-use concrete bowl will maintain its current form, adding some amenities like power, so that can be used more as a performance space that it doesn't have the opportunity now. The arboretum area would be to address removing the turf in those spaces to help mostly the existing oak trees that are there. The tennis courts, a slight shift of the tennis courts to allow a pathway, and we'll talk about that pathway in the future, but if you've walked through Rinconada Park, in that location, you have to circumvent the well site and through the magical forest to get to the pool, and that seems to be a popular path to get to the pool, and we'd like to make that an actual real path that addresses some safety and access concerns at that point. The pool area itself, maintaining the pool area and expanding the deck. The long-range plan itself doesn't delve into a recommendation of expanding the pool. I think that we all realize that that is an option to do in the future. If that is decided. What the long-range plan does do, though, it does expand the pool deck around the pool itself to provide the opportunity to have a full-size 50-meter pool basically installed there. So, of course, when we talk about the implementations over the long range, we can talk about, when we're planning on doing that and of course, the cost of doing such a thing. The group picnic area adjacent to the Girl Scout house will remain just to be enhanced with new tables and a new trash receptacle area to remove the dumpsters from that area. The Girl Scout house location would remain the same with some added amenities there. That's actually on the next slide, but we are proposing to add some type of fire pit area that would replicate the Boy Scout house fire pit area to provide the same basically amenities to the Girl Scout house. And then the main loop walkway, we would maintain that. We've heard from a lot of the community members that the pathway around the main turf area is used as an exercise facilities, so we want to maintain that circular pathway and even have the opportunity to increase the distance of it. These next items are existing elements in the park to be impacted more by their improvements or renovations. This includes the children's tot lot. Currently, that children's tot lot is closer to the tennis courts under an existing heritage oak tree. It's not the greatest location in association with that oak tree because of the compaction and just the hard playing that's happening under it. We'd like to, or the plan is proposing to relocate that tot lot closer to the Girl Scout house, combine it with the existing children's playground over there. The other reason for doing that is it allows caregivers the opportunity for their kids to play in one location without being having to watch in two far locations. Providing a new restroom structure. The current one that's in the middle of the park, we'd like to actually remove that aspect because it does block a key view straight through the park that's connecting all the elements. That would be done by actually adding on a new aspect of the pool building for a restroom facility there. We'd have to have a new restroom building structure anyway to meet current ADA standards, so moving that out of, like I said, the line of sight would be beneficial. The fencing around Walter Hayes School, enhancing that somewhat. Right now it's currently chain link and it does take up quite a bit of view out there, and it's not the most pleasant, so that could definitely be addressed. Creating a better connection to actually the rear of Walter Hayes School. So we heard that a lot from the community, that a lot of the students from Walter Hayes actually come in through the backside, through the park, and there's not really a direct path to get you to that gate, so we looked at doing that as well. And of course, then the reconfiguration of the Lucy Stern Rinconada parking lot right now, which is hard to figure out and drive through. Looking at renovating that to make it a better and safer experience. This next slide discusses the new improvements to the park that don't exist there now. That would be the addition of 2 new group picnic areas. As I mentioned before, Rinconada Park only has 1 designated group picnic area now. There's demand to have a more group picnic areas, so one of those locations is behind the tennis courts, which there are picnic tables there now. This would just be a more organized and larger group picnic area. And then out along Hopkins on the west side of the tennis courts. That development with that picnic area would also, in the long-range plan, is proposed to have a covered picnic shelter. The Tennis Association has shown interest in wanting to develop that and help fund that structure. The local tennis group uses Rinconada as kind of their main facility. They hold tournaments out there. They don't really have a check-in or a place for their committee to meet. So along with funding that, they would have requested that the structure have a room for them to use for storage and for their meeting, and also have an outdoor area that larger groups can meet, but also could be used by the community when they are not using it for picnic purposes. The next one calls out for bocce courts.
Where would this new building be?
It's right next to the tennis courts right here.
Okay. That's where the tot lot is right now.
The tot lot is more underneath the oak tree, but yes, right adjacent to it, basically.
Okay, thank you.
The bocce courts and the group picnic area, that's in this area adjacent to the, between the pool and the power substation. The plan recommends to activate that area and to provide some type of usable activity in that space. Bocce is an option. I think when we get closer to developing that space and when we get it on the books as a CIP to do with the project there, that we'll have further discussions about what that space is actually going to be developed as. We want to add 2 trash enclosures. If you've been through the park itself, you'll see that the dumpsters are just kind of scattered around. We want to make a specific place for them that is more concealed where they are, that trucks coming to pick them up can more easily access than where they are now. Developing a better plaza outside the pool area, providing adult equipment, exercise equipment in the park associated with the playgrounds, providing entry monuments at the entries, mostly at the entry from Rinconada parking lot, and then from the Newell Street entry, the idea is to either use art or some type of structure or architecture there, basically to highlight that those are the main entries. So from the parking lot itself, or from across the street at the library and art center on the Newell side, that you would be very clearly see where the entryway to the main connection pathway that leads you through the park itself. Developing a new walkway along Newell, along the power substation. Currently, right now, along Newell, there are a stand of a row of redwood trees that are planted underneath the high voltage lines there. Continuously, they are topped every few years because they, of course, cannot grow up into the high voltage lines. Unfortunately, of course, the redwood tree is known for its height and column reform. That is it's not that way anymore. That continuous cutting of the tree like that will eventually lead to the tree's demise. So what we would like to do there is actually remove the redwood trees from that location, pull the actual walkway off the back of the curb and get it more towards the middle of the space, have it more meandering in that space, much more of a nicer pedestrian walk that's leading you from the corner to the main walkway, and then replacing the tree planting in there with a more appropriate size for the power line's native trees, basically, and retreeing that area to help conceal kind of the power substation there.
So where are those trees on the map?
That area would be right along here. Right along Newell. Basically, if you're standing at the Art Center Library and you're looking right here, you're looking right at that row of basically of trees there. And of course, for sustainability purposes, we'd like to address removing some of the turf area that's out there, especially in spaces where it's not really usable on the edges, and also capturing and filtering of stormwater on site. We have an opportunity to do that as well. The last slide for improvements here are the recommended street improvements around Rinconada Park. Most of these actually have started to occur already. Like I said, we started to do this back in 2012 and 2013. You'll see actually a project right now going on Middlefield at the Lucy Stearns Center that's adding an enhanced walkway there. That was one of the aspects and recommendations of the long-range plan. A few years ago, an enhanced walkway was installed on Newell between the Art Center and the park itself. We'd like to also add an enhanced shuttle stop along Newell. There's one there now. It's just basically a park bench, but we talked about covering it or making it more special somehow in that location. And then if you've been to the park, there's a head-in parking that runs along Hopkins. There is a location now that towards the west, if you move towards Lucy Stern, that parking could have the opportunity to be expanded to give a few more parking spaces over there that would start to address some of the tennis and pool users to give them a little bit more flexibility with their parking to use those facilities. The next few slides I'll go through is kind of shows the ideas behind implementation. So the long-range plan itself is set up to be developed over a 25-year period. That's mostly based on economics itself and getting all the money necessary to renovate the park. You're basically looking at doing a project there every 3 to 5 years, basically, to fulfill the long-range plan. It will go through the process just as the projects of the master plan go through our standard CIP, where the projects will be on the books. Basically, we know we want to do these things in Rinconada Park, and we will discuss them and address them every year to try to get them basically into the calendar. These next slides, like I said, focus on what those phases will be. So that first phase looks at the west end of the park. It's more in association with the development of the Junior Museum and Zoo. While that project is going on, of course, we want to renovate the parking lot and then renovate some of the amenities that are down there, like the playground. So that constitutes the first phase, basically, of the project. Then we'd like to finish basically enhancing the pathway that runs through the park itself, since that is one of the main objectives of the long-range plan, which would focus on phase 2, would look at the development of the space in front of the pool, as well as the development of the second group picnic area. The third phase starts to look at the main lawn and developing, renovating that space, as well as developing the third group picnic area and the covered picnic trellis. With renovations also to the Newell walkway, completing the connection of the walkway along Hopkins. That, I guess, is a two-phase thing. Currently, right now, there is no sidewalk along the Magical Forest section, which is this section right here. It has a decomposed granite pathway. We'd like to connect the concrete path from there to there, so it is a continuous one. There also is not a concrete path that is between the parking area and the tennis courts. There is ample room, though, to create a walkway there, so we'd also like to then continue the walkway in front of the tennis courts as well. That hooks up to the sidewalk that's on the other side to enhance that whole edge and the connection to that whole edge. It also looks at the pathway improvements to the Arboretum and upgrading those paths there, as well as kind of the secondary entries along Embarcadero to give a park more of a statement, so you can notice it and see the entryways from Embarcadero as driving by. The fourth phase is the development of the Arboretum, which again, there's not a lot of development there. It's mostly the renovation and removal of turf to enhance the trees, and then the minor renovations for the concrete bowl. The fifth phase is looking then at the magical bridge, or the magical, excuse me, magical forest, and developing the area then between the pool and the power substation that's there. The sixth phase, and it's put further down the line, I touched a little bit earlier on creating a pathway basically in this location that currently ad hocly exists there now, but we'd like to make a real pathway. In the scheme of the tennis courts themselves, the paving will need to be replaced at that point, and when it does, then we'll basically shift the whole tennis court area over 15 feet, but that is not really required here for the next 10 to 15 years time frame. So we're going to allow that transition to play itself out naturally. And then, of course, the final phase of this is the swimming pool area. And you can see basically what's happening here is the development of the expanded pool building with a restroom facility inside. There's also been some talk to have a multi-purpose room in there that could be used for classes. A lot of classes happen at Lucy Stern. It's a beautiful building, but I don't think it was intended to be a gymnasium. So it would be nice to have another space for small-scale classes to have a location in. And as well as you see the actual pushing out then here of the pool deck area, that would then allow the pool to be expanded to a larger size in the future. The next slide starts to talk a little about our schedule. So we're here tonight to basically represent the long-range plan to the commission, since most of the new members have not seen the project at all. We will be coming back at some point when the CEQA aspect is done, and I would say that that is currently going on now. It's 30-day review period we're in the middle of. It ends on September 5th. If you have any comments per that environmental study, again, it's for the long-range plan and the Junior Museum and Zoo. September 5th is the kind of the deadline or cutoff to comments per that environmental study. I will get more in detail of the findings of that study here in a second. And then, of course, we'll take the actual long-range plan and the environmental study then to council for adoption. I'm hoping that happens at the end of this year, that we can do that. And then phase 1 construction, again, is predicated on the construction of the JMZ, or the Junior Museum and Zoo, which I think we're currently looking at around the summer of 2019. So whenever that takes place is basically when that kind of first phase will kick off and be done. And it'll, again, focus on the parking lot itself and then that west end of the park. So with that, I'll take questions or comments about the long-range plan.
Oh, you shouldn't have done that, Keith. So first off, I wanted to say I'm impressed with all of this. I'm particularly impressed with this fold-out drawing that has probably 700 different items on it. I will talk to this, just the presentation just made briefly for a minute. The slide that says project goals, it talks about create better connection and awareness and facilities around and within the park. And the one thing that I thought I was missing from this is another version, because I understand why this one's just the park, but in fact there are tennis courts here, there's a library here, there's another park across the street, there's the community center, and then there's Lucy Stern and whatnot down here. And the same comment that I made with the bridge, the safe routes and access and so on. I'll use this while I'm holding it up for a second, because it talks about, on that same slide, project goals, it says park users and guests. And down below it says coordination of user group objectives. I'm missing the same thing I've missed again in the bridge one, for example, of who really is the audience. And the bridge one, it was, are we the spandex crowd or the weekend crowd, or are we the Google crowd or whatever. Here, I didn't see anything either in the presentation or the documents before that said what we're really worried about is the aging population of Palo Alto, because that's a speech you get all the time, or is it the teens or whatever. What I think this addresses is the organized groups, the tennis players, the swimmers, all of whom had, their own lobbying capability, but it didn't address the people who didn't have that. And the reason I say that is if you go back to some of the other park stuff we've done and say what are people most interested in Palo Alto, you get access to nature. And nothing here really says, by the way, access to nature. On the other hand, you're doing things that are access to nature. And so that's why I looked at this and said, the Arboretum area and the behind the power station and area and the magical forest, and then extending that across the street to the rest of the redwoods and the other parks that are over there is all a nature area. And it would seem to me that if we looked at all of that as a nature area, maybe we would address it differently in terms of access. I was there today because I knew we were doing this tonight, so I wanted to go through it again. I live relatively close, and so I go there all the time. But if you go into the Magic Forest, you find feathers on the ground, so there are birds that are in there, and how do we make this more of a nature area? This whole area is suitable for accommodating that. The next diagram that is the one that shows the path, and thank you for doing that, because I was going to recommend we have something like that. My first comment would go back to the slide above where it says pedestrian and bicycle circulation. I would love to see two diagrams, one that said bicycle circulation and one that said pedestrian circulation, because they're not the same thing. I advocated them being separate in the comprehensive plan all along. Different people do different things, and inside a park like this, they're counter to one another, I believe. And so you have to worry about, if you have a 15-foot wide path, does that mean that you can go faster on your bike and it becomes more dangerous? I don't know, but I think we should address that. The other thing that this does, and I have a couple of friends who are currently having to use walkers. And so I end up going to Mountain View, Baylands, or whatever with them, or going to Stanford with them, where I can take them with their walkers. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a trail, if this thing showed a trail all the way around, not just around the grass area, but all the way around the park? And so, silly me, when you said circulatory pathway, I got sucked in because I said circular, but it's not circular. It's a straight line through the middle of the park. I would sure like us to see, you could make, if you were really imaginative about it, you could make a very long walk that went across the middle of the park, through the Arboretum, around behind the Magic Forest. You could make it so it was all walkerable, and you could even cross the street and go all the way around the library and through the redwoods there. And since we're always giving speeches about the aging population, I'd sure like to see that. And we're trying to address that by having adult exercise areas, and adult exercising is walking these days. I mean, if we could address that. You say that one of the elements of maintenance is the magical forest, and then you say in a further slide that one of the things you're going to do is put picnic area into the magical forest. I think those are contradictory, and particularly if you do what you've done in the Arboretum, is put concrete platforms on which to put the picnic tables. That's a dangerous thing to do with all those redwoods. In the next slide, we talk about the restroom structure being part of the swimming pool. Does that mean it'll only the restrooms will only be open when the swimming pool's open?
No.
We need to make that clear that's one of the things. I'll skip some of this stuff. The other thing is that you've got an enhanced shuttle stop along Newell. I guess that's okay, because I can't figure out where else should put a shuttle stop, but it'd sure be interesting if you could make the shuttle stop be sort of an indentation or something. In redoing the whole park, I'm not so sure why you wouldn't change where the main entrance was instead of it just having at the two ends. Could we maybe put the main entrance to be along Hopkins? And I applaud what you're doing by adding potentially 7 more parking spots along Hopkins, but gee, is that all? Can't we find a way to add more? Because the parking usage here is a bit of a contradiction. Well, it's not a contradiction; it's a conflict. We're going to put in a brand new, beautiful junior museum and zoo that's going to attract, I believe, more people. And you've got more parking, and now you're making that also parking for people at the same time for your park. And I would try and find that. And anything we could do to eliminate access along Embarcadero. One of the other things you said is you want visibility of the entrance into the park on Embarcadero. I would do anything you possibly could to hide the entrance. Yes, you may want to get into the park, into that part of the Arboretum, but I think that the parking right up against the fire station there is a very dangerous thing when you're coming along Embarcadero. And if we're going to the park, maybe we can walk a little further. The only other thing that I thought when I was over there is, as you redo some parts of the park, if there was some ways to make some elevation change, even little mounds that made you it's just incredibly flat. And I've got more notes, but I'll write them down and send them to you. Keith, thank you. I told you you'd be sorry to let me go first.
Thank you. Lots of excellent plans and ideas and details. I especially like the enhancements near the Girl Scout house, the combined play areas, removing turf in the Arboretum, protections for the heritage oak in the Tot area, improved focus on alternative transportation. I do like the idea to have separate bike and pedestrian circulation diagrams. And the connections to adjacent facilities is important to consider. Maybe it doesn't fit in this document, but it would be nice if we could find a way to dovetail that in. Could you just clarify the main parking lot plan as far as the flow? There's access from Middlefield and there's access from Hopkins. Those sections do connect over the raised pedestrian way?
Yes.
Okay. So it'll be a raised pedestrian bikeway that you have to go slowly over. Okay, great, thank you. Regarding the Magic Forest, mention is made that the redwood shallow rooting structure would, quote, limit improvements in this area. I'm kind of struggling with the implicit philosophy of this wording and wonder if we could focus on advocating and planning for planting species native to the redwood forest understory and look at that as being the development rather than considering hardscape. And I agree that we want to avoid concrete in the area for picnic areas or what have you.
Yeah, I think the idea was that the actual picnic tables would be just loose picnic tables. They would not be attached to the ground, and they actually would not sit on any type of pad. They would just sit on the existing grade that was there. The Magical Forest does take up an area of the park itself. It is a beautiful space, but not overly used for items. So, I think there is some debate on if having anything there at all, just benches, it could be as well. But I think that we do when we have that as an aspect of the project to enhance that area, do kind of want to hash that out and discuss more of what we want to have there. But the idea would be to have the least amount of impact. Right now, currently, we would consider the Magical Forest as one entity, as all the trees are growing together, so they're basically all as one. They are, because of that interconnectedness, it does make it very difficult then to start to build or develop things in there that don't have any type of impact basically at all. Currently now, they are and have been under extreme stress. Unfortunately, the redwood tree, our city is named after the Palo Alto, but it lived in a very isolated little area, and outside that area, redwoods require a lot of irrigation.
Sure.
So we've had to address that now and start to water those trees more because we do want to maintain that space. But
thank you. No, the trees are certainly cherished here, and they also don't really belong here historically or ecologically, and I think that's all the reason to focus on preserving this grove, and they have suffered in the drought years of being underwatered. Could we consider adding interpretive signage and about redwood forests and redwood ecology to further focus on that area? It seems like that would be a plus for the area. You mentioned there was a desire to improve the path through the area. I'm assuming that doesn't mean paving in the area. Is that paving on the side by the tennis courts? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it would be closer to the tennis courts. We do want to, again, to try to limit the amount of a compaction to the soil there and direct people to a more established pathway. So we did try to move it actually on the other side of the well site that's there currently now to avoid impacts to the trees.
That's great. There were mentions that there would be bike racks added, but I didn't see them on the diagrams anywhere. I was wondering if there's a reason for that, or if they could be added so people could comment.
Yeah, we can put a symbol on there showing the degree of the additions for sure.
Great. I understand this plan's been in progress for a number of years now. Pickleball seems to be rapidly growing in popularity, and I'm wondering, and I think it could be expected it'll have a strong foothold within the next 25 years. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to include any reference to pickleball within the tennis court and pool area section.
I think that the time of and like I said, for all these projects, they'll basically come back to the commission and to the community for further feedback. So definitely when this plan was started in 2012 and 2013, pickleball was didn't even really exist at the time. So you can see then, again, this is kind of an interesting study that goes along with the whole master plan thing, that as time goes on, then things will change. And because we have kind of this process where we'll come back and look at these and study these things again, that yes, who knows, maybe pickleball won't exist anymore and there'll be another game that we want to look at. That's why I preface that area that the bocce court is called out in, is, who knows exactly at that time what we do want to put in there to address and make it and activate that area. So I think that definitely all those things will come up through the process of renovating those spaces.
In a similar vein, and you were subconsciously referring to this earlier, the Magical Bridge type facility is looking for a location in North Palo Alto, I'm sure, on the other side. Is there any consideration that something could happen in Rinconada Park somewhere? Maybe it's not appropriate to include it in the document at this time, or is there a place to make a reference to that?
I don't know about the scale of the playground being the size of Magical Bridge, but definitely we will bring the ideas and elements that were learned from that playground and the popularity of the playground into what we design and build there in the future. So it will be a lot more inclusive. It will have some very similar equipment and accessibility aspect to it. Again, I'm not sure if the scale of the playground will be the same, but it definitely will live along the lines of more of a Magical Bridge than what it is now. What it is now is really not inclusive or accessible at all with the tan bark and the equipment that's there. So we do want to address that in the future.
So this discussion would come up at the time the playground is redesigned?
Right.
Or the older kids and the younger kids. Thank you. And just a minor point in the mitigated negative declaration on page 37, there's I suggest correcting the scientific names of the tree species, both for the little leaf linden. It's called out as Tilian cordata. It should be Tilia cordata. Remove the N. And the London plane tree is referred to as Plantinus. Suggests Plantinus x acerifolia. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
I will wait till the end, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Quick comment on, one is appreciate the ideas of putting some of the, finding ways to shade areas. I think is very good, especially for the seniors or the adult area and the younger kids. One thing about the tot play area would, as we think about design of that, I think it's important to, if it's for tots, to have some sort of barrier to entry for the older kids who, if there is any shared playground space, it doesn't matter if you might think, oh, a bigger kid wouldn't want to play on that. They'll migrate towards the whole space. And I have a 5-year-old, and I see that often going to different types of playgrounds, or we go to Eleanor Pardee a lot, and you see that where even though they have an older playground, and then within that same complex is one for maybe, more towards 3 to 7 or whatever, you still get older kids coming over there. But especially if it's for tots, to find a way to keep it separate for them. I also saw that with the idea for the field, as those trees age out, and you mentioned not replacing them, is that then maybe they become multi-use, perhaps for a soccer field at some point, or I don't know if they're big enough, but just other ways to use those fields?
Yes. The idea would be not to I think that mostly the idea was not to recommend planting any more trees out in the turf area. Mostly that's just for the trees themselves, because usually new trees take on a lot of damage when they're planted out in the turf area. The existing trees out there are, though, in good health, so they could live past the plan itself. So the idea would just be that where they are currently now, that we wouldn't replace it right in the exact same spot. I think we do and will plant more trees and more native trees in the future around the park itself, but we would like to keep that turf area open for group activity.
Then I have a question about the multi-use concrete bowl. Does that currently see use by groups?
It does on a smaller scale, not a lot. I think the last thing I really remember being programmed there was the yoga that was done in that space.
Yeah.
Right, I can speak more to that.
Yeah, Raina Halpern, Assistant Director, CSD. We use that amphitheater space sometimes for Twilight Summer Concert Series we've had there. We had the Clay and Glass Festival there once in the last 5 years. We've had regular use there. But that's one thing we hope when we actually do reconfigure the park, that we'll be able to make it a more usable space.
The summer concerts, are they always in the bowl, or are there other locations in the park that they do?
There are different locations in the park, and we also have them at other locations, California Avenue and Mitchell Park. So we've actually been using a lot of different locations. We've had them in the bowl, and then we've had them closer up to the west end as well. So we try out different ones depending on the sound, the amplification needs of the particular concert.
And with the changes to the bowl proposed, would you anticipate that all the concerts would be at that new location, or would you still move them around different parts of Rinconada?
Not sure, because we're moving them around to different parks and locations too. So I don't see Rinconada being the only or even the main.
I'm not talking about, but if you were to have a concert at Rinconada.
Yeah.
I think it mostly depends upon the concert and the anticipated crowd.
We haven't determined that.
Okay. Most of the activities like that, I think outdoor movies and things of that nature are done in the turf area because it is a larger space that can accommodate a larger crowd, where the bowl itself is restricted in its layout there to the size of the crowd. So I think that's one factor that limits the bowl space itself. I do think that there's other things that we can also discuss with the bowl when we start to enhance it. There was discussion of installing movable skate apparatuses, that attach basically to the ground, that you could move out of the way to open up the space if you wanted to use it to just activate the space more. When it was designed as a skate bowl. That's what Royston and RHAA had intended it, because at the time that was a good thing to do, that people did a lot of skating. So that's mostly why the bowl was developed. And actually the little stage part that's out there now, which is a kind of an ad hoc little concrete space was added afterward. The long-range plan recommends moving that over a little bit to reduce the amount of sun in spectators' eyes, and to, I think, get it closer to, a little bit closer to the pool building, which has the power and those types of things that would be easier to get to that location.
Thank you.
And then what's the, I imagine with some of this, especially with the Junior Museum and Zoo, there's hope for even higher usage of the park, is that correct?
It's felt that the development of the Junior Museum and Zoo will definitely have higher use at the beginning, just because it's attracting because it's a new, basically attraction, a new building. The overall a review of that facility, and because of the size of the kind of the display areas they're doing, are fairly close to what there is now, that it's not anticipated that the actual use will go up.
Okay.
In that
One of
respect.
the reasons I ask is just in terms of, there's times where Middlefield is so impacted, and some of you who work with Lucy Sterner in that area just know that it's, whether the transportation committee or whoever's looking at Middlefield, it seems to get more and more crowded by the month, with people using it as a way to get places, or for the bigger trucks especially, to find their way around Palo Alto.
So one thing that is going to mitigate that is in the new parking lot design, we're actually going to be able to accommodate buses a lot easier. So we'll be, hopefully we'll see an increase in pedestrian and bicycle visitors, but we'll also be able to have buses instead of all those single cars and accommodate a lot more. So right now we accommodate about 1 bus a day, and we'll be able to accommodate about 5. So we'll be able to see a lot more visitors with less impact in the traffic.
By buses, you mean school buses, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, if you don't mind, because I'm going to excuse myself. Okay, thank you. So all I'd love to say is that I love Rincadata Park forever and ever and ever. I'm glad we're doing this. And it's great to see the thoughtful responses and the plans that you put into this. And I loved all of the comments that the commissioners have made. So it's all good. Especially the part about pickleball, the swimming pool, and the bowl area, which has a ton of history because there used to be a pickle family circus in the bowl area many, many, many years ago, along with Tai Chi and the Women's Equal Rights March last spring. So I wouldn't want to lose the bowl at all. And I love it that you're thinking about putting sound in there. I think that's going to be really great. As an event organizer, I would welcome that. The only thing that I have to say about this is that summer 2019, is that when year 1 starts of the 25-year plan?
Yes.
Okay, so I was hoping I misread that, because that's what I understood too. And I would just say that I really liked our chairman's comment today that children do grow up. So if there's any way that we can accelerate the park plan, it would be a great thing to do. That's all. Thanks for letting me leave early too. I appreciate that.
Can I just add something that you'll like to hear to that? And that would be that we're actually expecting to break ground on the new JMZ, if all of our plans go as planned, in June of 2018. And that's about a 2-year process. And so when Peter says it'll be a year later, it's to coordinate the West End park improvements with the JMZ construction. So we are moving really, really quickly, constantly. So I just want you to feel really assured of that.
Thank you.
This is really terrific, and I had many of my questions answered. When the Junior Museum and Zoo presented to us earlier this year, they talked about bathrooms doing the bathrooms for the Rinconada Park, so we didn't have to do it ourselves, and, or at least they would be used by both facilities, both by the park and by us. And I was wondering, has that changed?
It has a, I think, looking at, let's go back to these slides. The original footprint of what was studied in the long-range plan for the Junior Museum and Zoo pushed the zoo quite a bit further out into the park itself. Along with that pushing out, and I guess one trade-off for that would be that the rear structure of the zoo then would also house a restroom that would be accessible to park users. Because of the reduction of size into the park, as well as just the cost of the overall project, that aspect of the park, the project was removed, as far as the bathroom being incorporated within the structure of the JMZ. It is still, though, the recommendation that we do have a bathroom installed down at the west end, giving the park basically 2 restrooms, but it would stand more as an individual structure, closer more to Hopkins due to the fall of the utility that's out there to hook up to. So currently that's the idea now. The long-range plan is still calling out and recommending a bathroom down there. It cites it as the junior in the Junior Museum and Zoo, but we know that that cannot take place at this point, but we do still want to recommend to have a restroom facility added to that into the park.
So they will have their own bathrooms separate and distinct from the bathrooms that we want to add in the park?
That will be within the Junior Museum and Junior Museum building itself. So, you know, access-wise, you'd have to, you know, walk into the actual building itself to use those bathrooms. We would like to provide just to park users the facility that didn't have to access the Junior Museum and Zoo itself. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think the Junior Museum ought to use that same bathroom and not waste all that space that they could be using for their exhibits, but I don't know. Anyway, and similar to that question, at one point we were going to have them come out into the park, the zoo, come out into the park a little tiny bit and have a little mini amphitheater where they would show animals or share animals. What happened with that?
That was something that was discussed within I guess the development of the zoo. Again, because of the reduction of the encroachment of the zoo into the park, that's not an aspect of the development of the Junior Museum and Zoo plans. When we do work on, though, and bring back the plans for that west end of the park, we can look at that. We have started to study a more expanded group seating picnic area that's closer to the zoo back there that can be used basically then for to facilitate outdoor activities. Most notably, the flying of the bald eagle is a very popular thing that occurs in the park that can allow then groups to gather at to partake in that event.
Okay. And then the last question I had is that we've had separate discussions with Christian about dedication of undedicated land. And one of the pieces is the tennis courts that are, not, I guess, not in the park. They're just across the street. There's tennis courts and a parking lot. As part of this master plan, is it possible to add those tennis courts, get them dedicated, and added to the park?
I think that would require further discussion with staff. There.
Hi, Darren Anderson, Open Space Parks and Golf. That we call them the Newell tennis courts, and that is dedicated parkland. It is part of Rinconada, although it's separated by the road. It's already dedicated.
So they should include it in the master plan. Okay. Yeah, the long-range plan.
Right.
That's all I have.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. I liked a lot of the comments, the 3D topology, having some berms or something for the kids, because it is very flat. I think that would be a good addition. I love the Magic Forest, so let's not mess with it. I like maybe putting some benches in there, low-impact benches, or I like the native species under the redwoods. I think that would be a really good, if we can work that out, that would be another good addition. Multi-purpose rooms, I think that's really good for the camps, birthday parties. There's a lot of reasons why you want some space right at the pool. So I think that should be a good addition. Phase 1 will add the tot and the older kids' playground next to each other. What will happen to the tot playground, the existing tot playground, when you do that?
The idea would be to leave it until the next phase of that development, and then we would remove it. I think it has another 5 to 10 years of its life before it actually needs to be renovated. So we will basically be looking at that, and then if that project doesn't come along by the time that playground needs to be renovated, then we probably will just remove the equipment itself at that time and open up the space.
Okay. West restrooms, I think we have to have restrooms down there. If we have a separate building, how much of a penalty is that from cost and logistics, as opposed to having it butt up against an existing, either the Girl Scout building or the Junior Museum?
I mean, it's definitely an amenity that takes up some space out there. We looked at the location closer to the group picnic area behind the Girl Scout house. There's an existing screen fence that exists there that kind of runs along Hopkins that kind of that screens the picnic area from the street. That would be a good location to put it in that location and meld it into that screening, so there is really no visual impact to the park. There is an area there that's kind of in the Y of the existing path that it could fit that's not overly usable, so we have started to look at an area where that is feasible to do, that has has limited impact on the park as far as using space and being an obstacle, and incorporating just the feature itself into that end of the park itself. So.
And the cost and maintenance of these small buildings are not a big deal?
No, I mean, it would just basically be very similar to the restroom that was put in Awanas Briones Park, standalone prefabricated structure. It's basically a $300,000 project. $50,000 is associated mostly with the utility to hook up to that building. So, it's a new facility as well. So we've also been discussing ways to fund these aspects of it. We have a standalone CIP for restrooms that we could consider using for that. We could also start to use perhaps park impact fees because it is a new facility that doesn't exist down there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to get the restroom there without impacting our CIP funds for that. So.
Okay. And finally, the last thing is parking. Parking is so tight there on weekends. When I look at the tennis courts, can we put parking under the tennis courts? Is that feasible, or is that just too expensive?
Well, anytime I think it's 5 times the amount to go down than it is to go up. So it definitely does have some cost associated with it. That's definitely something that we could, look at in the future. Doing there.
Maybe we won't replace the tennis courts for like 20, maybe 15 years on that.
Right. I mean, it's definitely, I think that it's an opportunity that could be explored. Definitely parking is difficult there. I think that it would have to, though, give and supply, though, a good amount of parking. Adding another 20, 40, 60 spaces when the park is really used for large events really is not going to have much impact on the parking that is existing there. It will mostly flow out into the neighborhood as it does now. So it's not addressed in the long-range plan now, but maybe something can be discussed further in the future.
Well, I just wanted to add that I think the goal is, instead of encouraging more cars to come, is encouraging people to take public transportation, to walk or bike, and people will start using less cars in the future, I think. So I'd prefer from my standpoint, is to encourage people to get away from taking cars to the park.
I'll support that viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean,
And I like that as well. That goes back to my safe routes to the park idea, the same as you get safe routes to the school and stuff. I think that'd be really important.
if you can get people to do that, that's great. My concern is right now the neighbors are really impacted. And so is there some way of squeezing out more parking? So, okay. Does anyone else have follow-ups? Okay, so what's the status going forward? So we have the CEQA underway.
So the CEQA is underway. The slides here are similar or the same to the slides that we looked at for the Parks Master Plan. These few slides going through of the reason why we go through environment and have basically CEQA done for the project. The environmental review, the initial study did look at both projects, like I said, the Junior Museum and Zoo and Rinconada. If you just basically want to cut down to the chase, there was not a lot of mitigation that is required there found in the initial study. Basically, your standard things that we look at normally, nesting birds when time of construction need to be reviewed, dust needs to be mitigated, if any historical or the things are found during the digging, that those things, that digging stops, then you have to have an archaeologist come in and take a look at those things. So all those basically standard mitigations that go along with construction projects are the mitigations that are recommended by the environmental study. Because the park itself and the Junior Museum and Zoo are both existing entities, there's nothing really major that is planned to change or to add to the park that would have a substantial impact to it. Is why the mitigated negative declaration was the process that we basically went in. So, if you would like me to go further and why we have CEQA and how it came to be, but really the bottom line is that no major impacts from that study were cited, and the mitigations are our typical standard mitigations that we would have for any development project in the park.
Okay. And so hopefully we have Junior Museum breaking ground the following summer.
That is the plan.
And then the phase one would be the following summer after that.
It'll be coordinated with that. So, I imagine that probably is going to be about a year time frame as they build the building, because they are going to stage in a portion of the existing parking lot. So they got to get themselves to a point where they can unstage themselves to then start working on basically the parking lot and that end of the park. So we're probably talking about the next year.
And Keith, I didn't hear summer, I heard June.
Thank you, Don, yes. Okay, thank you very much. This looks like a fun project. I hope I'm around for the whole thing, so.
Well, I do think the commission, I know it's been a while since it's been back, and you didn't get a chance to be involved in the original rounds of coming to you in community meetings. So, but I am happy that we're almost there and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and the kind of the first phase of the development of the park, being scheduled. So that's good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Good job. Okay, next we will move on to Buckeye Creek. I'm at the bathroom. Cover for me, Dave. Okay, so if you could toggle for me. I think it is, to the right.
Good evening. Are we waiting for the chair to return? I can wait. We're down to, I didn't think we have a quorum.
I think we're ready.
Excellent. Good evening. My name is Darren Anderson with Open Space Parks and Golf, and I'd like to introduce my colleague Kurt Dunn. He's the supervising ranger up at Foothills Park, and my consultant Jonathan Buck with NGO. And we are here tonight to share with you the draft report for the Buckeye Creek Hydrology Study and to collect your feedback. And I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of what we've done since our last meeting, March 28th. And we'll focus mainly on the recommended action, which we're calling the preferred alternative, as well as the other options that the city can consider and the cost projections. And then lastly, I'll go over the next steps. So after the March 28th commission meeting, staff and the consultant further developed the creek improvement concepts and shared them at a community meeting on June 12th. And although there were only 4 participants at the public meeting, there was unanimous support for the recommendations to solve the creek's erosion problem. But acknowledging the fact that we got such little turnout, we decided to make poster-sized display boards of our proposals and post them at the park. And we did it in 3 areas: Wild Horse Valley, Los Trampas, and the 7.7 acres, and inside the interpretive center. So rangers would talk to people, and they could also just leave notes as they come up to this. So we got about 10 notes on the feedback, which was all generally positive, and I'll just go over a couple of the ideas so you have an idea of what some of the park visitors are thinking. When I say that, a lot of the people we've been speaking to about this project have been environmentalists, and they're very focused on creek and habitat improvements. And we wanted to make sure we're reaching out to other constituents of Foothills Park as well. So this was an endeavor to do so. And some of the comments kind of reflect that. Some good suggestions saying, please consider adding benches and campsites along the new creek sections if possible. I assume they mean up by the Wild Horse Valley section. Others commented that they love the idea and would love to see a beautiful, healthy creek. They're all for making the place look better, and we should do whatever it takes to do it. Some people said, I think you should be better off spending your money to fix those closed trails before you improve the creek. And just as a side note, that's something we are working on now, and it would be different dollars, so they're not competing. Another person wrote, creek restoration is a fantastic idea. I think it'll be much more diverse and interesting and allow the full enjoyment of the creek. A last one I'll mention was because it was a little bit different. It said, after shifting the channel, wait to do any planting until the creek has run its course and let nature dictate what comes next. So using that feedback, the feedback from all our community meetings, the stakeholders, the commission, our ad hoc, and our park visitors, the consultant developed our preferred alternative design. And while there are other options that we should definitely look at and consider, and I'll go over them today, and they were in the report as well, the focus of the draft report is that preferred alternative. And I'm going to break down the 3 core sections of this preferred alternative in order of priority. And the first is the Wild Horse Valley section. And I'll ask my partner Kurt here to use the mouse, if you can, highlight different areas. So this is an area where we create a new section of creek in what is currently that grass meadow, Wild Horse Valley, and it would meander through this area that actually is most likely the historic floodplain. So it's really putting the creek back where it was originally intended to be, kind of where it wants to be, because right now it's being choked off in what's really a glorified drainage ditch. It's deeply channelized, and we've talked ad nauseum about the challenges the creek has and how it's been constrained and pushed off to the side. This would create approximately 2,600 linear feet of new creek channel and about 5.5 acres of new floodplain. And I want to clarify, this would result in 2 creek channels on each side of the Wild Horse Valley. There's the existing one that would remain, and then this new one on the other side. And they'll merge together, and Kurt will kind of point this out on the map, in Wild Horse Valley, just above Orchard Glen picnic area, if that makes sense. The second portion...
So that right now it goes under the road, there's a bridge that goes under that road. It would use that same bridge?
Yes, the existing channel will remain in that portion. Okay. That's correct. The second section I want to tell you about, also part of the preferred alternative, is in the lower reach, and this is in the Las Trampas Valley. And in this area, it would create approximately 3 acres of floodplain by removing the soil material in that existing grass field. This is the manicured mowed grass area across from the interpretive center. And much of that is fill material. And again, that was most likely, from all indications, historic floodplain, where that grass is, and where we would recommend taking about half of that grass area, and it would weave and meander and become this new floodplain, and closer to the historic alignment. I should point out, we had some questions I just want to clarify. So there's an existing channel there. Again, it's deeply channelized. And to add a little clarity on what would happen as we excavate the soil out towards the center of the turf, that deep channelized area would be filled with soil from our project, and it would just have a nice, easy grade up towards the center of the turf. The last section of our preferred alternative is the 7.7 acre area. And much like the Las Trampas Valley section, this would be widening the section of the creek. It would take about 2/3 of the flat area adjacent to the creek there, and it would bubble out. There'd still be enough room for a pathway on the exterior of that portion if we chose, or you could even put a pathway inside that floodplain, because it's not going to be full of water most often. We just have to be with the understanding that whatever trail or amenity was in that floodplain area, it'd be surrounded by native plants and vegetation, and the kind of trail that would need a little more maintenance, or it'd be a simple, more meandering style of trail, if we chose to do that. And that improvement on the 7.7 acre area would result in a 1.2 acre floodplain. The next one, if we could go, this is just a graphic. I think some of you might have seen at the public meeting, and if not, it just gives a little more clarity on what these restoration principles would look like in terms of how we'd be slowing down water. And I'll turn to Jonathan towards the end if you have specific questions about how that works and where that would be in the creek channel on Buckeye. So the preferred alternative would retrofit existing grade control structures too. So we've got these grade control structures. You might remember there are rock gabions. That's the metal enclosed rock areas that are in a number of areas along the creek, but mostly in the Wild Horse Valley section. And also wooden gabions as 2 wooden grade control structures. And their intent, they were put in the 70s and the 80s, was to slow down this water and help address the erosion problem. And they're at their end of their useful life. So it's important to note, and I'll get back to that in a moment when we talk about alternative choices instead of the preferred. So that would be a part of the preferred one, is we'd have to do that. And the cost of this preferred alternative, including design, permitting, environmental review, and construction, is approximately $9.7 million. And it would take approximately 5 years to complete all those portions that I just mentioned. The draft report does include that detailed, itemized cost estimate for the preferred alternative, and it recommends that we do the entire project and fund it at once due to the severe condition of most of the portions of the channel and the complex permitting process associated with creek restoration. Let's look at the alternative options, and this is in the staff report and in the body of the draft report. But I also want to go over these because these are important when we're talking about a $9.7 million project. One option the city could choose is to do nothing, which is what we've done for the last 40 years or so since the last grade control structures were put in. And I just want to explain what that means. So the idea is it wouldn't cost us anything, but that's not quite true. Those grade control structures, I said that they're at their end of their useful life. So in about 5 to 10 years, they're going to fail. They'll fall apart. Additional portions of the creek will collapse. The pedestrian bridge that goes across to Los Trancos Trail, this is in front of the Interpretive Center, that bridge will collapse. There's not a lot of support on either end right now. So if we have additional erosion, it's not long before that fails. 5 to 10 years, I think, is a realistic expectation for that. And when that happens, we're talking about vastly increased erosion, vast amounts of sediment sent downstream, big impacts to the environment, and necessitating putting in some structure to protect most critical, but not solely, the utility corridor in Wild Horse Valley. So we've talked before about this utility corridor where we've got water lines, we've got sewer, we've got electric, we've got fiber, we've got phone, all hugging the very edge of that levee, this creek edge, I mean, all through that section. And so if the grade control structures fail, then you're putting that infrastructure at risk. So we'd have to come in and do something. So it's really not a no option, it's really a deferred option with expedited and increased cost if we were to wait 5 years and do it after the fact. There's also the risk that when we come time to do this no action thing and they fail, that the regulatory agencies say, we're not going to let you only fix the grade control structures. We're going to require you to do more. That's a very, very real possibility that could happen. Another alternative that I mentioned in the staff report is we could propose just to do the grade control structures and the pedestrian bridges now, if we wanted, as a minimum project. Just knowing that this would not solve our erosion problem, it would not solve our sedimentation, deposition, or flooding issues. But given the current state of that channel, the retrofitted grade control structures would need to be designed even more robust than in the preferred alternative. They'd have to, because they'd be standalone now with no other improvements. So they'd be more expensive and have to be significantly more substantial, essentially being able to address those large sediment loads. So they'd be more expensive. And this scenario would be difficult to permit. As I mentioned, it's possible the regulatory agencies would say, no, we're not going to let you fix a creek problem solely with engineered rock solutions. The approximate cost for that grade control structure and pedestrian bridge with the permitting and design would be about $1.3 million if we went with that minimum project. The third alternative I discussed in the staff report is we could split these into separate projects, individual projects, and perhaps phase them. There's different combinations that are possible. Because of the majority of the sediment is coming from the upstream portion, this is the Wild Horse Valley portion, that would be the preferred spot, the best bang for the buck in terms of addressing the most problems for the least amount of money. So if we were to do that, that would be the spot. We'd do that uphill, the upper reach section first. And of course, if you're to do that, you would also have to do the grade control structures throughout the reach of the creek, which would be, if you were to do all of that, it would be about $3 million. So that's just the upper reach and your grade control structures throughout the creek process. And I'm going to ask Jonathan to explain a little bit more detail later on during your question portion about why those costs change depending on if you phased it, why we're recommending that you do it all in one shot. Because when you go back to the regulatory agencies on a piecemeal basis, it could be far more expensive. Same thing with scaling your construction to if you're bringing them out at one time versus multiple times if we phase it. So that's why we suggested that we fund it all at once and do the project as one contiguous project rather than a phased solution. However, as I pointed out in the staff report, the funding is an issue. We don't have $9.7 million allocated. In fact, we have no money allocated to this project. The staff report discussed some options. One is a series of grants that NGO has identified that would be applicable, possibly fitting, but there's no guarantee those are available. Another is mitigation matching, and again, I'll have Jonathan explain the details of that, but essentially it's when there's another project somewhere in the Palo Alto area or even the Bay Area where they're impacting creeks and they can't mitigate it themselves. They pay us because ours is a net positive. in terms of creating habitat. This other project would take away, and they'd pay us for that. And we would potentially make, this is a very crude estimate, but somewhere between 1 to 1.5 million if we were to sell and be successful with those mitigation credits. So there's still a big deficit if we were to go for this preferred alternative that I mentioned, and we'd have to figure that out. Also, I have not yet had a chance to discuss this with the city manager's office, so that will be one of the next steps, is to go over that with our city manager's office, make sure they're comfortable with it, discuss the financial impacts to the city per this recommendation. So it could change a little bit pending some feedback from upper management with the city manager's input. The last thing I just want to say is, so in terms of next steps, and I should point out, perhaps you've been seeing them, but we had some sample photos of what those restoration sites would look before and after to give you just a rough idea of some comparable sites and what we could expect to see out at Buckeye Creek. So the next steps would be, I'm going to do a check-in with the city manager's office, and then depending on how this goes and how our conversation goes tonight, in theory, we could come back next month with an action item for the commission to take action and say, yes, we recommend that council review this, adopt it, and direct staff to pursue funding. Any comments from my colleagues on the presentation? Anything we missed that's critical? No, I think you summarized it well. Anything for our ad hoc committee members that would like to chime in?
So certainly it would be great to do the whole project. And I think that what you said about if we did nothing, we still have major maintenance costs. And it's not just the existing structures, but also the channel has gotten much deeper, especially near the interpretive center. So you're going to have to probably double the size of the depth of the current structures, which will cost some significant amount, and probably you're going to have to fill in the gully by, with about 5 feet of something. So, so I just want to make sure that the council knows that in your report. The other problem is that we can't wait 5 years to get the money to do something. So we really have to address that sooner rather than later. And I'm also wondering if we couldn't give you, after everybody's spoken here, give you an action today. Why do we have to wait till next month to give you a recommendation?
It's not agendized.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't agendize it as an action item, so it'll only be a discussion this month.
Okay. And then my last comment is that you talk about paths down to the creek to get people, kids to go down to the creek. And those paths, are they going to be like concrete or something that's going, you couldn't put gold dust because that will wash away. So what do you intend to do to make those more permanent?
Yeah, and currently there's no trails designed into this. Oh. But it could be, and it would probably be more in keeping with the rest of Foothills Trail. So it'd be the natural dirt there, compacted, maybe to some degree, there's an element where you let the public figure out the best route. So it'd be a mix of us providing what we think is the least disturbance to the habitat and where we haven't planted plants, because a lot of these are going to be big naked floodplains at first, where we come in and plant a lot of stuff. So we'll put in some access points. I can tell you from 20 years of helping manage open space, access to creeks, they're going to go. Whether you provide them a spot or not, people are going to go down to the creeks. And I would much rather provide them a safe, open place where they're not going to be trampling on sensitive plant species or impacting the wildlife. So I envision, a clear, safe path that gets them where they want to go. And then a monitoring process where we truth our guess. Is this the right spot? Do people really want to go there? And if it's wrong, we correct it quickly and find the more appropriate spot, assuming it's environmentally friendly.
and you may have to reinforce it a little bit, or it might wash away.
I think that's entirely possible, especially on big rain events like we had this last winter. I think that's entirely possible. And it might be the kind of thing where it's not a very expensive trail. It's just a very casual one that doesn't have to be robust. And we know that it's going to take a little brush work and a little compacting each year, perhaps.
Okay, that's all I had.
Are we asking questions now, or should we wait for the presentation talk a little bit more about the creek restoration, or what's the?
I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if the ad hoc had any specific comments they wanted to make, and if not, that concludes the staff presentation, and we can just answer any questions the commission has.
Yeah, just a quick question. With the restoration like this, and the money that we're spending, nature takes its course, I suppose, right? And this would be a lasting, I mean, pending what nature does to it, but as far as it becoming channelized again, or it becoming where there's lots of required maintenance, or what's kind of the future looking if you're spending $9 million?
I'll let Jonathan address this one, I think.
Well, that's a good question. I think the answer is that if we're going to spend $9 million, we're going to, try to provide a project where future maintenance costs are, I'm going to say, negligible. That's basically, keep in mind you have a mile of creek, and that's why it's so expensive. But in order for us to get permits from the federal and state agencies, we basically have to show that we are restoring the creek channel back to something that is not going to require, I'm going to say, regular maintenance. How's that? There's always some periodic maintenance, with all of the, flood control channels that we have. But the idea is that somebody isn't going in there every year and scooping out sediment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So as a member of the ad hoc, I've contributed a lot of comments to Darren already, and I'll be more brief in just a few things I'd like to outline. I'll start by saying I'm fully supportive of the preferred alternative. It's an awesome plan, and it's great to see that we're garnering community support in modest numbers for now. But I know as I've popularized the plan, it's been very well received in my skewed circle. I do think the funding issue is going to be a big question mark, and that's not a surprise to anyone in the room. I guess one question I have is, do we have any idea of what percentage of the funding will ultimately fall to the city to come up with respect to the alternative funding sources you've outlined?
I think we'll get guidance when I meet with the city manager's office and our budget team and ask them that very question. And they may give me guidance and say, you're looking at good luck with the grants. You're going to have to find enough grants to support X percent of the project. So I'll find out more when I speak to them, I think.
And that comes before you go to council or after?
That's
council?
Correct. This would be before. I'm hoping to do this in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Right, because I think council would certainly appreciate having a better idea of what we're talking about here.
I agree.
Do we have any friends in the city manager's office?
We do.
Excellent. A couple comments. Darren, you were explaining the Two Creek Channel process, restoration process in Wild Horse Valley. I'd really love to see that outlined much more clearly in the document. I know the area well. I'm an interested party, and when I first looked at the document, it was really hard to follow. So there's this new creek. There really are 2 creeks. Just spell it out. Say, there's going to be a new creek channel added. This will be a second creek. The west side will flow here. The east side will flow there. Or just really spell it out, and that would be both in section 412 and also in the upper reach section of 422. it'll really help people looking at it to get a clear understanding, or maybe perhaps in some of the initial summary remarks as well, just talking about, when talking about the 3 sections, point out in the upper reach section that's what's happening there. In section 4.2 of the lower reach, you mentioned that the fill material would be some of the area that is being used, but I don't see that spelled out. That's a question mark. It's got to get filled in. Can we elucidate what we're planning to fill it in with as appropriate? And then in the cost analysis of section 6.1, I see we're adding 3 new footbridges in Wild Horse Valley in the drawings, but I don't see these called out in the Table 8 cost estimates. So the 3 new pedestrian footbridges in Wild Horse Valley, the connections to the existing trails, I'm not sure that those have been accounted for in the estimate.
I confirmed with Jonathan they are, and I'll make sure they're clear in the revised estimate.
Other than that, I can forward more comments to you offline.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Great job, and let's keep this moving.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll only echo, great job, especially in all these tables. I spent a lot of time trying to sort those out. I would caution us not to talk about $9 million and talk about $10 million, and then maybe come in at 9.7, and I think that might be better. For me, the only question is the ongoing frustration of the 7.7 acres, and you know from the conversations we had that I view that as 1.5 acres of problem, and basically that 1.5 acres is the floodplain that you're defining. So, maybe if you look at it that way, it's not a problem, because the other 5 acres is that hillside. And, we talked about, could we create a path or something through there that would provide initial access to that and allow us to move on. That's my only comment. The rest of it, I think, is great.
Thank you.
If Kurt would stop showing pictures of all these great meandering streams that was just getting us all excited, then we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah, I too am quite happy with this. Well, except for the $10 million part, but the design I think is good. The question is not whether we're going to spend money. The question is, do we do it on our timetable or Mother Nature's timetable? And a series of Band-Aids may end up being just as expensive, and you'll end up with nothing with it. So I think our only choice is to move forward, because the erosion out there is real. If you go next to the what used to be a hillside is now becoming a cliff. And we may lose bridges and lose access to some really good hiking trails. So I don't think we have any option. We have to find money somewhere. And hopefully you can find it through grants or some other ways of doing it. But good luck.
Okay. One quick question. When you're talking about the cost of doing nothing, is there a liability from residents or whatever they're downstream from our park that if we keep dumping silt, they'll end up flooded or respond? Or
There's no doubt that we would have a significant impact if we waited till the grade control structures failed, that we would send enough sediment down there, in our estimation, to severely negative impact the neighbors and perhaps cause flooding. The legal liability, I'm not quite sure. We'd have to check with the city attorney.
maybe that risk should be mentioned in the document.
David.
I don't want to give anybody the idea that we don't want the full solution, and that the no solution is really not valid either. But the option you gave of doing a portion of it, the Wild Horse Canyon first, and maybe we only have enough money to do that. Can you give a little bit more information about the impact that would have would it solve 20% of our problem, 50% of our problem, or 80% of our problem? Because I'm willing to bet you that the council's going to ask that. So do you have any rough idea?
You know, I asked Jonathan that exact question. I said, if we just do Wild Horse Valley and the grade control structures, what does that get us? Because I know people are going to ask that very question, what percentage? And you know, the truth is it's difficult to answer, especially with that kind of detail. But anything more to say, Jonathan?
I would say it would solve somewhere between 50 to 65% of your problem, something like that. It's probably more than half. Let's put it like that.
And that's the $3 million solution.
Right.
As opposed to 9.7. That's a huge difference in the price. And we probably will get some pushback from council about that.
Does that 3 million include the grade structures, updating those?
Well, I believe so. I think, keep in mind though, I don't know if that number includes the soft costs associated with that solution. So you'd have to add another 20% onto that number.
Right.
At least I think that's, I'm not sure exactly what you have written in your
Yeah,
staff
the
report.
3 million.
We may need to clarify some of those numbers in terms of
You
what
indicate
the
that
real
the
cost.
3
I think
million
that's a construction cost.
I would suggest that you clarify that, because
Right.
any 80-20 rule just doesn't sound right when you say we're going to spend a third of the money and get 60% of the, that just doesn't sound right. I'd expect it to be the other way around. So I think we should do some homework, as David suggested, on that.
Will do.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that big gulch there over by the interpretive center, by the footbridge, that looks pretty severe. I'd be surprised if just the Wild Horse Valley would fix that.
Yeah, and it won't. Wild Horse Valley will not fix it at all. It'll just minimize some of the sediment deposition further down, but it won't
So
solve
that gouging will still be the same.
The gouging will still continue.
Yeah, so but when you say, when you're answering David's question, you're answering what percentage of the silt problem.
Yes.
If in fact, the next thing you have to do is take that bridge out, just because it's unsafe. Now it's not a financial cost, but it's you're going to reduce the usability of the park, and you're going to have to do that with more than that one bridge, and you're never going to open the 7.5 acres, which you've been told you have to do. So there's a incremental costs that are usability costs, not financial costs,
Right.
and not silt costs.
And potential issues with the permitting. As Jonathan had mentioned, it's entirely possible the regulatory agencies don't accept a minimal project, and they put us through the ringer and require more.
What's our confidence that if we do this preferred alternative, that it gets through regulatory?
Well, we sat down with the regulatory agencies and discussed it and got our guidance, and the preferred alternative is predicated on their feedback.
Okay.
So we have a good indication that it would receive approval. But to that point, I guess you never quite know for sure. Things change, personnel change, and opinions change. And we are talking about not a 6-month process, but permitting would likely be, a year, I'm sure, at least.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
So what's the next steps going forward?
The next step is I'll check in with the city manager's office, pending the outcome of that conversation, come back with an action item for approval in next month for the PRC, and then it would go to council as soon as I can get on their agenda, October, November, most likely.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Okay, next we move to ad hoc committee liaison updates. We have the output. Does anyone want to talk to their action?
Before Darren leaves, AT&T property. I and Don are going to the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks on September 9th before our next meeting. And one of the things that they were very interested in was the AT&T property, and because maybe they can help us buy it. But you have been going through some iterations with other departments. What's the latest? What do I tell them?
You know, I don't have any new news on that since we last communicated on it. We're kind of in a waiting game, is what I heard from our real estate division, who's been corresponding with AT&T to find out when they're going to release, what their plans are for dividing the property. And so the last I heard in my communications with real estate staff was that we're still waiting for information. So I don't have any new information, unfortunately, for you tonight.
Well, if you could get one more, I don't know, talk with them
Sure.
before September 9th, I'd appreciate it.
I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
So back to ad hocs. Does anyone have anything they want to talk to about their ad hocs, or is what's in the summary good enough? Okay. Then we'll move on. Comments and announcements. Okay. Tentative agenda. Right now on the handout we have 5 things, 4 PIOs, or I guess like 3 PIOs and 1 CEQA. I think the park dedication we have to move to October, unless those PIOs slip.
It's possible that the Baylands PIO and the Bike Bridge PIO may have to move. We have to get legal advice from our city attorney's office, because the reason why we didn't have the JMZ PIO on today is because the CEQA recommendation needs to happen at the same time. And CEQA will not be done for Baylands Boardwalk and the Bike Bridge.
Oh, we can't do a PIO without CEQA?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So those may slip till October. But the way things have been going, I'm sure we'll probably get a few more things added to September, so.
Okay.
Or if it slipped, would you move anything from October to
We
September?
could present either youth and teen services, any of these really could move to October, so
Okay.
I think we'll be fine.
Well, you can talk to the people who are presenting and see who's most along, far along, and can present easiest. Any of those from October we can move up. Okay. Oh, that's a good point. November 28th. Do we want to start talking about what alternate date for November?
Yeah, November and December, although
November 28th.
It's after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
yeah, it's the Tuesday after
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
that should be fine. It's a Tuesday after Thanksgiving.
Okay. Okay, so let's leave that for now.
December 26th might be more problematic.
We'll have to decide when we get closer whether we just bump the November 28th one to early December and combine those two. But let's keep November 28th for now. Okay, so that, unless anyone has anything else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourned. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Good night. See you next month.
Thank you.